Human pet guy? No, I don't want to go over that. That's just a crazy person debate. That's just a crazy person debate. What substantive commentary could I possibly do on that? You know what he looks like, right? Here we go. Holy shit, he has his own Know Your Meme page. God damn. What political opinions do you think you're going to get from a guy who has facial hair like this? Now, I will admit, I think this is based as... Because, as we all know, real power is committing to the bit. And he's committed to this bit about as hard as any human can. So, I respect that. However, apparently he's like a libertarian monarchist. He defends the Bengal and Irish famines all in 1 hour. I mean, I feel like someone who looks like this has to defend the Bengal and Irish famines because he looks like one of the people who would have been perpetrating them. Like, yeah, obviously he defends them. He did them. Like, what do you mean? I think you should watch it because his apologism was very good. He's not an idiot like a lot of the rubes you get. We're reacting to the Keffals thing and I'm playing Minecraft during it. You did this. I'm just gonna build my little house.
Now, I made a thought experiment in an ethics debate and people took it out of context. It would be like calling Schrödinger the hat poisoner or calling Jonathan Swift the baby eater because of a thought experiment.
So wait, you don't even... So you don't actually have a human pet or want a human
Keffals
pet, but it was like
Minecraft.
a thought experiment and people just rolled with it?
Yeah, it was a thought experiment. I wouldn't have room where I'm currently living for human pets.
But you don't want one, or you wanted one? I
think that's outside the scope of this discussion.
I see.
Good answer.
I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I'm just letting you know.
Yeah, fair enough. I was actually quite impressed Gremlo never brought that up, but it seems that any time I discuss politics with people, they seem to want to bring that up. But I had a discussion with Gremlo recently in which he didn't bring it up.
I mean, it's an interesting part of who you are. I mean, like, whenever I talk to people, they ask me insane questions. There's a lot associated with who I am.
I guess what you are most associated with, I guess in general, would be your your backstory with Kiwi Farms, and more recently you accused Mommy Big Dick of having committed sexual assault.
Oh, yeah.
But that's the thing. A lot of the content you've done is other left-wingers cancelling you, or you cancelling other left-wingers. I just say, honestly, are your core values so incompatible with the right that it wouldn't be worth, crossing the aisle?
Oh God, is he trying to recruit her?
You'll get more done. What you'll be doing will be different. You may be perhaps advocating for a return to feudalism instead of whatever it is you currently advocate for, but you'd be able to get more of that done because you wouldn't constantly have to worry about people cancelling you.
I mean, most of the people who go after me are incapable of canceling me. Like, they don't share an audience with me. The people who they engage with will never respect me. And a lot of them I don't even consider to really be on the left.
Get out.
Like, I definitely wouldn't consider the Chinese government a leftist government or people who support authoritarian governments.
Does he understand the concept of people having principles, beliefs? I actually don't think that's as common as a lot of people think it is. Like, we saw this with Anna Kasparian, where somebody on Twitter was like, you'll just side with whoever gives you praise. And Anna was like, you're goddamn right I will. And it's like, wait, is that an own? Are you wait, is that you doing an own right there? Like, what are you talking about? I think for a lot of people, it never will be anything other than lunch table politics. Like, their political allegiances are almost entirely determined by who treats them nice and like nothing else. So people like, I guess the human pet guy here or whatever, will be confused and they'll be like, well, you know, the left treats you really bad, so why be with the left? And like they don't understand the concept of having values. Or it's very strange, you know? I mean, I guess it's not strange, it's pretty common. You know, it's not strange in the sense that I don't see it often. It's just not good is the thing.
What do you mean you wouldn't consider? We're talking about Red China, yes, not Taiwan. Red China. Of course they're left wing. Their main political party literally has the word communist in its name.
Right, but what makes them left wing? Is it just a self-identification thing?
Well, that's clearly part of it. I mean, you're transgender. Don't you believe in self-identification?
I feel like when you're talking about political orientations, there needs to be substance behind it. I don't think it's
all right. They have a plan. They have a centrally planned economy. They've outlawed pretty much all other political parties. They've heavily suppressed traditional religious practices in favor of mandating a state.
Actually, they've really walked back on that. In line with their recent shift towards more like overtly Hitler shit, they have the Chinese Communist Party has done a lot more promotion of like traditional because if you'll remember, the Cultural Revolution was all about Mao like weaponizing a bunch of angsty college students to destroy all the uncool shit their mom and dads really cared about. You know, that was like the whole point. And lately they've been completely walking back on all of that. I'm sure Mao was like rolling in his grave or whatever. Sag.
A state materialist, or what I would consider essentially a state religion that is materialist in its outlook. It makes no claims of extra material properties, but it is, I would argue, religious in its nature. I would say all of those are extremely left-wing principles. They manipulate their own currency to an extreme degree. You know, we do that to some extent too, but nowhere near as much, and I wish we did.
Notice how not a single thing being talked about here has anything to do with communism.
Right, but you believe in, you're a monarchist, so you're not necessarily against authoritarian governance.
I am a reactionary libertarian monarchist, and I will tell you this, if you look through history, most monarchic governments have been far less authoritarian than republican governments. If we look at France, the republic that succeeded the monarchy carried out far more political killings, was far less tolerant of individual freedoms. We saw the same thing in Russia. We saw the same thing in China. The idea that monarchies are inherently authoritarian is just untrue.
What?
The most authoritarian governments in history have been republican governments. If you look at Britain, the history of Britain,
right, but
the most dictatorial leader in our history was a man named Cromwell. He was not a monarchist. He, in fact, killed a monarch and took over as a republican leader. He was the republican leader, and that's at the time they used the word Commonwealth, but that's something people tend to forget. Britain used to be a republic, and it was a dictatorial republic.
Okay. Right, but like
I don't think the idea that you've made, where you say
the king
don't you like authoritarianism?
The king is covered by sovereign immunity. Like, he cannot commit a legal wrong. He's immune.
So right off the bat, I don't have much experience debating monarchists, but I think I already see where this wagon is circling. The first thing to understand is that when you're talking about like, well, is a monarchy bad? Is it like more dangerous or whatever? We're not like the way the person obtains their power is irrelevant, right? If a nation is controlled by a single individual, it really doesn't matter whether they got there through hereditary right, through divine appointment, through whatever. It's like we're talking about a one-man, like ruled government. So the question is, what incentive structures does this allow for or lead to? Like, what are we building here in reality? Yeah, because Cromwell was a dictator. It's not like Cromwell was some kind of like, he uses the term Republican because Republican is like the great enemy of monarchists, right? But it's not like he was like a Democrat or whatever. It's really just a matter of authoritarianism and the incentive structures put therein. It's an aesthetics thing, If I'm ruled over by like a one-man party or leadership or whatever, I don't really care whether they got there by blood right or by having a bloody coup or whatever else. In fact, you know what? I'm actually going to agree with one thing said by the human pet guy. I will agree with one thing said here, which is that by manner of just pure stability, The reason that we as a species settled on monarchies for so long as a default form of governance is because having a hereditary bloodline to determine who came into power next was a stabilizing force. You wouldn't have as much question as who comes next, though certainly people still fought over it, of course. So if you're going to have like a one-man leader anyway, if you're going to have a Stalin or a Hitler or whatever the fuck else, fuck it, do it by bloodline. It's easier than whatever other system you're going to use. At least that's simple. It's a little bit less ambiguous. Obviously, I would prefer there not be a dictatorship. That would be great. But if you're going to do a dictatorship, you know what? Fuck it. Have it be a king. You know. But I'd prefer no dictatorship.
From civil or criminal proceedings. That is authoritarian.
Yes. Do you not have the exact same thing for your government? In fact, you have more than that because.
What do you mean, my government? I live in Northern Ireland. We have the same king.
So, then what are you complaining about?
What?
Complaining about the fact that they're immune from the legal system.
Yes, but the exact same thing happens under Republican governments as well. That's a basic principle of separation of powers. And in fact, I would argue that republics are often go further than that. If we look at the United States of America, for example, which is a republic, we can agree, a democratic republic, in fact, a constitutional democratic republic. Hunter Biden is functionally immune to prosecution.
Oh, man. If I had, like, a bingo checklist for this, it would not be monarchist complaints about Hunter Biden. Holy shit. Yeah, dude, an absolute monarch having complete immunity to the law is exactly like Hunter Biden not getting arrested for the crime of having a meaty cock or whatever the fuck he did. Jesus Christ. His girthy 9-incher is immune to the law. You claim to defend the principles of democracy and the republic, but this girthy meatbat's not seen 1 ounce of justice. No, sirree.
Just because he's related to the current president.
I feel like this could easily be disproved by looking at Trump right now.
Oh boy.
Notably, he's not president anymore. They didn't do this to him while he was president. Being president functionally made him immune to this. They're now doing it to stop him from being president again. Why are they so desperate to throw all these prosecutions at him? Because they know they'll have to stop if he becomes president. So you have explicitly a legalized political system in that country where those in power are immune from prosecution, those out of power are subject to prosecution whether or not they've done anything wrong.
Notice how he's also describing, even if he was correct in his descriptions, notice how he's describing the parts of our society that we want changed. Like, well, your system also has, like, powerful people who are immune to the law. You know, like how Donald Trump is really, really, really difficult to throw in jail despite all the obvious crimes. Like, okay, yeah, we want to change that. He's saying we should double down on it. Like, this guy's saying, yeah, you know how Trump is, like, immune to prosecution? We should have more of that. In fact, Donald Trump should have been a lifetime ruler. He should have been a hereditary monarch with the power to just completely, like, you know, like, just execute people trying to prosecute him. Like, oh yeah, man, that sounds great. That's a huge improvement on our current state of affairs. Thank you.
And I see your chat talking about impeachment, but your chat are ignorant fools because impeachment explicitly is not the same as being convicted of a criminal offence. Bill Clinton was impeached for raping Monica Lewinsky, but he didn't have to join the sex offenders registry. He didn't have to go to prison or be fined. He doesn't even have a criminal record.
He didn't rape Monica Lewinsky. Wait, is that the accusation? Wait, I thought this was just, we're talking a little hanky-panky here. We're not... I think it was, you know. Yeah, his impeachment was for perjury because he lied about it, not because he got a blowjob. Which, you know, whomst amongst us.
Even though it was found as a result of that impeachment that he was a rapist.
Him finally getting prosecuted is the result of actions that started while he was still president. The wheels started moving long before what is currently happening.
The wheels don't take 3 years to turn, let's be honest.
So yeah, this is all a rhetorical... Oh, wait, hold on. This might actually be a really good debate to go into. So this is all a diversion because remember, Human Pet Guy isn't like attacking the problems with our system. He's saying that these are inevitable facts of leadership that we should just accept and lean into. So, like, what we have to remember here is he's not, like, successfully criticizing democracy or whatever. He's saying, hey, you know how there's corruption? Well, since there's corruption, why might as well have infinite corruption? Like, okay. All right. I don't know if I'm convinced by that argument necessarily. I don't know if that's doing it for me rhetorically. And the idea that we have no accountability to people or for people in leadership is absolutely not the case. Like, Donald Trump is 100% sweating right now. If he was a hereditary monarch, then he never would have left power to even, like, be given the opportunity to be legally charged for his crimes. Nixon had to resign because he feared the legal and political ramifications for Watergate. Like, it's not, you know, it's not like a one and done thing. Corruption exists, but it would not improve under a monarchy. I think a lot of people don't know because there's not that much point in learning about this kind of history because it's like, you know, old history or whatever. But I think a lot of people don't understand how cartoonishly corrupt, ineffective, and buffoonish old monarchs were. Like, because all we hear about like a couple of monarchs or whatever, but one of the most famous monarchs that we Americans learn about is King Henry VIII. And the thing we know about him is that he started hundreds of years of conflict by breaking off from the Catholic Church purely so that he could more women. And like that's repping monarchy, you know? But like it goes worse than that. I'm pretty sure that he was considered like not even to have been one of the craziest and worst monarchs of England. Like it gets pretty bad. Anyway, I'm talking for a while.
See, I don't agree with
now because they want to impact the upcoming election. Let's be honest, it doesn't take them 3 years to prosecute someone.
Yes, it does. It takes quite a long time to actually get the legal system to do anything, regardless of who it is.
Fuck off.
Doesn't seem to when it's just some ordinary person committing some ordinary offence or allegedly committing some ordinary offence. Didn't take them nearly this long to go after, I'd say that Kyle Rittenhouse bloke. I'm pretty sure it took them a lot less time than this. So the idea that they had that it simply took this long, no, they wanted.
What? Yeah, because the facts of Kyle Rittenhouse's case were like direct interpersonal violence of which there was video evidence, and for Donald Trump, they're trying to determine like a nationwide conspiracy. And there was like a year in between. Yeah, why would he go to Kyle Rittenhouse? He probably defends Kyle Rittenhouse. I need more wood.
To do it now because now is when they think it will impact the election most. So the idea that the monarch, the sovereign immunity of the monarch is a bad principle or a bad idea is functionally any system has to have that. If you don't have that, then you can't have meaningful separations of power.
See, he's like, this is good, actually.
The judiciary be independent of the executive, and the executive be independent of the judiciary, unless the judiciary is unable to prosecute the executive. If the judiciary can prosecute the executive, then there's two possible outcomes. Either the executive takes control of the judiciary, or the judiciary becomes sovereign over the entire system. There's no meaningful separation of powers when one branch of government can just throw the other branch in jail.
This is completely incoherent. That's not how it works. But he's an authoritarian, so he probably doesn't understand that. He's saying basically like, oh, well, you know, if you don't make the executive immune to legal consequences, then the judiciary will just always put them in jail all the time because they're not always politically aligned. And that's like absolute nonsense, obviously. It is possible to have a functioning government where people disagree and aren't like abusing the law to be at each other's throats all the time. But he's an authoritarian, so he probably doesn't... Oh, Jesus. He probably doesn't, like, recognize... Damn it. Alright, we gotta get back down there. Got a mission, folks.
You have to have the executive be immune to the judiciary. No system has ever functionally managed to avoid that. That is the functional reality of any system of government. If you want a separation of powers and multiple co-equal branches of government, you can't have any one branch of government directly exert its authority upon another. And as the authority of the judiciary is to find people guilty of crimes, it cannot be able to do that to the executive. Otherwise, it would be placing itself above the executive, or the executive would have to take direct control of it. Because that's the
King of England has the power to dissolve Parliament.
Yes, he does. He does not have the power to pass laws, though. He could dissolve Parliament, but then the moment he wanted to get a new spending bill passed, or he wanted to authorize new taxes to raise an army, he'd be forced to allow Parliament to reform. It's a series of checks and balances, not an ability to exert unilateral punishment on it. Notably, he can't stop someone from running for office again. If he dissolves Parliament, what does that mean? It means fresh elections are called. If the same people win their elections, he doesn't get to say, no, you can't run. He could threaten to indefinitely dissolve Parliament, but then he'd never be able to get any laws passed.
Right, I don't understand how you're trying to argue that a monarchic system is not inherently an authoritarian system.
Because plenty of monarchies throughout history have been significantly more free than many republics. Why do you think monarchies are inherently authoritarian? Argument. And if you do think that, why would you have left a republic to come and live under a monarchy?
I never lived in a republic. I'm from Canada. I lived in a monarchy, and then I moved to a different monarchy.
Okay, well, hold on, wait. Let's not pretend that England and Northern Ireland and such are monarchies. I know that we like to say that as like a flippant turn of phrase. You know, like, oh, because they have a king. Like, no, that's not how their government works. The monarch still has power. They don't have no influence. But let's not pretend that, like, the central mode of power in these countries, like, this is a system of a monarchy. Like, no, the decision-making is done through the republic. You would be surprised. No. I'm not saying that the queen has no power, or king now, whatever. I don't give a... I'm not saying the monarch has no power, but, like, let's not pretend that the apparatuses of this country, the decision-making that is being done, is the decision-making of a monarchy. Like, that's how this is all working. Like, come on.
I don't think Canada had a monarch as head of state.
We have a king, the King of Canada.
That's just a constitutional monarchy? No! A constitutional monarchy is a system in which the monarch is making the decisions and is bound by a constitution. Okay? The decisions that are made in the UK, in Canada, in such and such, are not decisions made by the king, okay? The king is just off touching little boys. That's what he busies himself with. Like, please, let's not, like, literally pretend that, like, what system of government does the UK have? Oh, they're a monarchy, even though all of the decision-making and power meaningfully is held by the PM and the such and such.
Is he still? I thought you guys got independence in 1982.
Well, we're still a constitutional monarchy. We have the Queen on our currency. We have the royal anthem.
What's up, dude?
We are part of the Commonwealth.
I'll let you stay down here.
Oh, so you are.
Yep.
Okay, so you did. So you left one monarchic government to go and live under another. Why not go to live in a republic?
Well,
Republic of Ireland. You had two islands you could have gone to. You chose to go to the monarchic one.
Well, you know, it's not to say we'll always be monarchic here.
No, you will be if you know what's good for you.
Whoa.
What?
I
try and stay out of the politics here because I don't want to brick through my window, but you know,
Yeah, do you know what's generally cut down on the window bricking? The fact that there is a non-partisan head of state. Do you want?
Well, there's actually currently no, at least in Northern Ireland, there's no head of state because they can't form government here.
That's head of government you're thinking of. Head of state is the monarch.
Right.
So that's exactly. Do you want that level of dysfunction to also extend to the head of state? Given how dysfunctional the government in Northern Ireland is, would you want that level of partisanship to extend to the head of state as well? The big benefit of having a monarchy, one of the big benefits, is that you get to have a non-partisan head of state.
I mean,
I think a very good thing to do.
The UK is in an abysmal place compared to even the Republic. Leaving the EU, Brexit was such a mistake. They have seen like
Why was it a mistake? Our people voted for it. We had a direct referendum.
And
why would he care about that? What? Why would he why would his ideology care about whether or not there was a referendum on that particular issue? Like I've said before, it's like the innate incoherence of authoritarians, you know? Have you ever noticed that, like, authoritarians are some of the most populist LARPy people out there? Like, there will be, like, people openly saying, like, we need to get rid of, like, the rule by majority, blah, blah. And then, like, you look at their politics or whatever, it's like, they just completely believe in the suspension of democracy. It's like, what do you... But then they're, like, screeching about how, like, the people rose up for this or something. I think a lot of people, it's just kind of like the cuckold brain of the authoritarian, where they all want, like, to be parented. Does that make any sense? I think a lot of them are just weak-minded, and they just want, like, a daddy, basically. They want a king because they want, like, a big daddy to look up to. And I mean that. I genuinely mean, like, I really do think that's, like, a primary motivator in their decision-making. They're weak and they want, like, an icon to look up to.
All of the polls that have come out since then have shown that people would not vote for it again because of the economic turmoil that's resulted from it. It's also caused, like, the reason why there's no government in Northern Ireland is because the Unionist Party is mad about the Irish sea border that resulted from Brexit.
That is the price of living in a democracy. People sometimes make decisions that are unpopular, but
Wait, what? Brexit was good because it was voted for by popular vote. Well, that's the consequence of a democracy. Sometimes you get stuff that isn't popular. What? Again, like, no actual ideology. Like, no real belief.
I would argue a direct claim, a direct counter-argument.
Also, I thought it was a monarchy, not a democracy.
Undemocratic. You have this wonderful tool that can boost the amount of democracy if there's ever not enough of it, and it's called a referendum. You don't need a democratic government. If you want people to have a say, you can just put the issue directly to a vote.
I mean,
fact,
yeah.
You could make a solid claim that we're more democratic than many countries.
You can do referendums in republics as well.
Vaush, people are monarchists because they believe the nobility are intrinsically smarter, better, and more capable of them. Oh, I actually disagree with this. I think that was the case before, but now I think that people are monarchists because they believe that they are smarter, better, and stronger than all the peasants beneath them, and that under a monarchy, a person like them would be in charge. They look at the government and they disagree with decisions being made, and they think, if someone like me was in power, the world would be so much more sensible, so much more safe, so much smarter. Now, a lot of them understand they wouldn't literally be the king or the nobles or whatever. Like, they don't believe... Some of them are that delusional, but not all of them. I think most of them understand they wouldn't be. But they think, like, okay, maybe they wouldn't be the guy in charge, but the guy in charge would be, you know, like them, and that's enough for them. That makes them think, like, oh, okay, well, as long as I got that, it would have all been worth it, basically. And I think this guy is one of those guys, right?
How often do they do? They almost never do, though. You talked about China. When has Red China, ever had a referendum?
Red China.
When has the USA ever had a referendum? How often do republics have referendums, Keffals?
What? Wait, what? Referendums are held at a state level. We have state-level referendums all the time. Like, constantly. Why does he insist on saying Red China? Because his, oh man. So, obviously, it's in a completely different way, but this guy has a destiny brain, where one of his primary motivators for political engagement is the reaffirmation of his feeling of intellectual superiority over others. Now, Destiny can talk his way around this guy for sure, no doubt about that. This guy has to rely on the British affect. He has to rely on the having a monocle, and a like that bullshit. So he says Red China, and he deliberately uses anachronistic terms to describe his ideals because he's trying to evoke that aesthetic of aristocratic intelligence. Of course, China went red, in the 50s, and by that point, republics had long since taken over the West, but, whatever.
I think they almost never do.
When do republics have referendums? The most recent referendum that I can think of in a republic was in Cuba on the most recent constitutional reform, and that was in 2019.
There are referendums,
but I feel like there's quite a few examples of republics that do referendums. 2022 Kansas abortion referendum.
Kansas is in the USA, but it's a state there. Is Kansas itself a republic? Is there a king of Kansas?
Is there a king of Kansas?
Yes.
I understand that it's part of the USA, which is a republic, but is Kansas? But individual states are allowed to have.
I am the
types
king of Kansas.
Is Kansas itself a monarchy?
I do not believe so, but it does have a governor, so it does have its own independent government.
Yes. So how does the governor take power? Does he ascend to the rank of governor when his father dies, or
why is that the ideal outcome? I think that's my biggest question. Why is a governance based on bloodline ideal?
There is no such thing as an ideal government when we're talking about humans. There's only the least worst or least dysfunctional. I think it's ideal because it protects the organs of the state from partisanship. You don't want every system of the
You're sneaky. I caught that Winston Churchill quote.
Partisan.
You found me out.
But yes. But what was it? Democracy is the best form of government. It is the worst form of government, except for all the others that have been tried from time to time. Yeah, you could always count on them to reach the right conclusion that they've tried all the others.
Yeah, I definitely would not take his opinion seriously, though, considering his part in the Bengal famine.
There we go.
Okay, Bluestone is saying the Constitution forbids titles of nobility. Governor is not a title of nobility. If he was calling himself the Duke of Kansas, yeah, that would be a problem.
All right.
Also, famine.
The question was just about referendums. No, the United Kingdom under Winston Churchill was exporting food while there was a famine in Bengal.
While there was also a world war.
Well, India was under colonial rule by the United Kingdom. The monarchy has served such a horrendous role in world history.
Would you prefer the India that existed before colonialism?
Yes, actually.
Which one?
Which one?
There was no such country as India prior to colonialism.
Okay.
Technically speaking, there really wasn't after colonialism because it fractured into India and Pakistan. If it had been perhaps a little bit more honest and called itself and said India fractured into Pakistan and Hindustan, which is what some people had called.
Wait, are you defending British colonialism right now?
Well, of course he's defending British colonialism, but he's doing it incoherently. What the fuck is he talking about? It's like, oh, well, how can you say that British colonialism was bad if before British colonialism, India wasn't even what India is today, but India today isn't even what India was then because it's fractured into India and Pakistan. So, he's not saying anything. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. What does that mean? What? I also liked his implication that the Bengal famine was just a totally natural, unintended thing that happened due to World War II, economic exports, millions of people dying was just oh, well, they needed the food, there definitely was no deliberate famine there.
Yes.
As a net
Keffals,
positive,
yes,
how do you justify that?
Why does India have a parliament?
Why does India
what do you think its system of government was before we came along? And the answer is it was no one system of government. India only became a single unified state.
And why is that the preferred? Why is a single unified state the preferred?
I like how he's implying that the British Empire did a favor by unifying the territories that would later split into India and Pakistan. Like, oh, well, if it wasn't for us, then how would those two groups have been lumped together? What are you talking about? That's the source of every problem. This isn't just like colonial apologism. This is like a British dude pointing at a map of the Middle East and going, and if it wasn't for us, then how do you think these lines would have gotten here? How do you think, if you claim to have a problem with the British Empire, do you? Well, then explain to me, chap, how would we have gotten Afghanistan in this exact wibbly-wobbly shape? Could you tell me that, lad? Because it certainly wasn't like that before we got there. What? I know. That's, yeah, I know. If it wasn't for our involvement in the Indian subcontinent, then how could we have expected to have procured what is now one of the most deadly ongoing standoffs between nuclear nations? How would we get Pakistan and India threatening to nuke each other every other day? Could you tell me that, chap? What? I don't want that. I don't think that's good. Go back.
Third position for India. That was something that was imposed on them.
There would be no such country as India.
Okay.
Gandhi's dream of we should have today a free India would literally have been impossible to implement before colonialism.
Because they wouldn't
He'd
have
had
called
to
it India.
Get every individual principality to agree to it, and there's no way they would have, because it would have required those individual princes to give up way too much power. And if we're being honest,
was there a political movement towards a unified India before British colonialism even?
No.
Then why is that something that matters if that wasn't something that existed before post-colonial India even existed?
Because if you're going to celebrate the Indian nation, say, oh, the Indian nation should be free, there couldn't be an Indian nation without the British colonialism.
No! What? You can't celebrate people's freedom from colonialism if the colonizers impose the national boundaries that they later were subjugated to, that later fractured and split apart and caused the India and Pakistan divide in multiple wars. Holy shit! Is he retarded? No. What this is ideology. Schniff. His first belief is that the colonial powers were good. Everything else comes second to that. So it doesn't matter how much evidence gets in the way of that belief. That is the belief that he has. So everything else is like completely subject to that, you know? And it makes sense for a monarchist, you know, he rejects Enlightenment values. And one of the Enlightenment values that he probably believes he has in spades but doesn't is rationality, a belief in empirical evidence. You know, he's rejected what many would consider to be the primary social value of the Enlightenment, but he's also done so with the you know, the primary empirical value. I feel like being pro-colonialism is automatically kind of retarded. Well, yes, but I only mean to say that the problem here isn't like lower brain functionality. Tempting as it might be to assign it to that, it's just you know, people do be wacky.
Right, but that's something that was imposed on them.
Yes, much as how the idea of a central British state was imposed upon us by the Romans. We were several smaller microstates until Rome came along. The light of civilization is often spread by the sword. It's unfortunate, but...
Oh, you know this dude loves his Crusader Kings, dude. Holy shit. In his mind, like, he's carving a marble statue of himself, dude. Holy... He's a stereotype. Yeah, Hearts of Iron 4-ass motherfucker, yeah. I like how he assumes the innate moral superiority of, like, centralized states. Like, having one gigantic state rather than a bunch of smaller ones. Why? I don't know. Hey, guys, here's a question, you know? If, like, the Red Chinese invaded Europe and then conquered all of it and like, melted down the 30 or 40 European nations into one or two mega nations, Would that have been the light of civilization? Like, oh, okay, so now Albanians and Serbians get to you're part of the same state now. Congratulations. German and French, have fun. Polish and Russian, let's go. Of course he wouldn't, because he likes it when white people get to dictate the terms of existence for non-white people, not the other way around. This dude's 100% racist. Like that's pretty obvious, of course, but you know, it bears repeating that this is not like an a-racial attitude.
Very often there's no alternative.
No, there is an alternative, because you're making it sound like the project. You're making it sound like the project behind colonialism by the crown.
Is this a unitary dictatorship versus federal democracy? No. Listen, the consequences of a colonial nation deciding the borders of a colonized nation are like almost always a failure. Like every time. Seriously, what we did in Africa, what we did in the Middle East, what we did in Southeast Asia, what we did in India, like literally every time the British Empire, whoever else, is like, oh, well, all right, chaps. So we know you have a bunch of religious, ethnic, and linguistic differences, but you see here, there's the same natural resources in all this part of the world, so we're just going to sort of fold you all into the same colonial protectorate, and you're all going to get along just fine, won't you? Won't you? Won't you? Won't you? And then, of course, inevitably, people rise up and kill the colonizers because they've been slaughtering 1 billion trillion innocent people every year. And then, whoa! It turns out that all these different ethnic and religious groups actually don't like each other that much. Something you'd think the British would understand, considering they've been at war with France for 5 million years, you know? Like, you'd think they would understand that just because you're next to another country does not necessarily mean that you're, like, going to share borders with them and get along just fine. But one thing that's important to understand, of course, is that the British did not think of the Indians as properly human. Nor does this guy.
Was bringing civilization, but it was about extracting resources from the colonies.
Can I just address someone in your
yes,
Mr.
of course.
Carlin Cole? Genocide was good, actually. What makes you think colonialism was genocidal? Colonialism has not been, I would say, generally genocidal. There's one major instance I can think of a colonial government committing genocide, and that was Germany in Namibia, where it genocided
the Bengal famine was an act of genocide committed by the government of the United Kingdom.
That's going a bit far, I think.
It is recognized as a genocide by the government of India.
I respectfully disagree with the government of India.
Based on what? Like, what are you basing that on? Like, are you actually going to defend what the British did?
Of course he will. Yeah. He'll defend
Ireland?
like literally anything. Yeah.
They didn't bring. The reason why the political situation is like it is because of the British. It's not because of the Irish. If you look at the Republic, it is significantly more peaceful than the North.
That doesn't seem entirely fair, isn't it? A lot of the separatist movements were founded by people down south.
Well, why do you have separatist movements?
To become monarchic, but the South is calling for the North to become Republican. The South is the one not willing to leave well enough alone.
That's absolutely not true, by the way. Separatist groups have been operating within and from Northern Ireland for ever, basically. The idea that it's all just like nation of Ireland rabble-rousers is completely untrue. But again, he probably also thinks the Irish are subhuman, and that the Irish living under Northern Ireland, UK control, are like totally like they're all just like peaceful cattle, you know, grazing on their plains, you know, under British rule.
No, the call for joining the Republic is happening from inside the North. I don't think there have been any modern statements, at least since the peace process, of calls from the Republican government of the Republic of Ireland for the North to join them.
They literally do have that saying. Was it they want all 38 counties, or is it all 32 counties? That is quite a popular Republican saying there. And furthermore, that whole, we're not directly trying to annex them, we're just funding movements in their country that want to do that, that's also what the CIA does.
How do
what
you...
Vladimir Putin does.
You can't annex somewhere that is not... that doesn't belong to you. Like, that was taken from Irish people. You can't annex them.
What was taken from Irish people?
Ireland. Ireland was taken from Irish people.
No, it was rightfully conquered.
Rightfully conquered?
This is... Okay, remember how I've said before that white supremacists will play this really weird semantic game? Where they will decry non-white people as savages and warlords and barbarians who know nothing but violence. And then, like, they'll gleefully explain how Aryan people or white people or whatever have a right to some part of the world because they successfully fought for it. And it's like this, it's this meaningless rhetorical game where, like, they clearly don't mind violence, but violence they do is based in red-pilled, and violence that non-white people do is, like, evidence of their warrior craniums being incapable of civilized thought or something. It's the exact same attitude here, you know? He's like decrying the incivility of separatist movements being funded by the South, but then with no irony, he will say, ah, well, we didn't steal Northern Ireland. We conquered it. It's like, wait, so you think it's wrong to fund separatist movements, but right to conquer with, like, a nation? That's fine? And the answer, of course, is whenever it's his guy, it's fine. No, yes, he is... Huh? Why am I getting hit by? He is wildly overstating the extent to which Southern Ireland is responsible for separatist agitation within the North.
There is no such thing as rightful conquest.
Of course there is. If you shut down all rightful conquest in history, well, we never would have been conquered by the Romans, and you still wouldn't have civilization in Britain.
Dude, we're never getting through this because this guy drops a banger every, like, 2 seconds. Sorry, guys. If Rome hadn't conquered Britannia 5 billion years ago, we still wouldn't have running water in the UK. That's how it works, actually. The only way to ascend up the tech tree is to have a larger country colonize you. It's literally the only way. If that hasn't happened, then you're stuck with shitting in houses for the rest of your life, lad. Man, these skeletons. Holy shit, calm down. Does anyone else feel like skeletons are really annoying? Like, the zombies and everything else, that's fine. But you always have to have a shield, because otherwise, like, you're down here, you know? So you can't, like, have torches in your left hand, which I'd much rather have, rather than having to switch all the time. What difficulty are you? Hard. But, like, it's... Oh, and then you have to, like, worm your way over there, under the barrage. Yeah, that's why African states conquered by the British are now wealthy industrial superpowers. Yeah, true, exactly, yeah. Of course, because they were colonized so many times, and that's what brought them civilization, you know? Like, Zimbabwe is doing fantastically after Rhodesia. Vaush, when I played Minecraft, there wasn't a shield. Yeah, but I think skeletons were less aggressive back then. Am I correct in thinking that? Because when I originally played Minecraft, there was also no shield. It's new to me. And I think they were less aggressive back then, because otherwise I think, like, it would have been, like, fucked. Like, yeah.
How far back are we going to take this? Did Romulus not have the right to kill Remus?
What? Jesus
Did the Greeks
Christ!
not have the right to attack Troy?
No, I'm not going to take this all the way back to ancient Rome.
Why not? No, if we...
Why not? Because I think it's a distraction from recent issues. I think...
Well, did conquest... Oh, did some magical button get flipped in the year 1900 and then conquest suddenly became wrong?
No, because you can't... No, because you can't flip a button.
Well, then why is it... When did it become wrong to engage in conquest? Keffals?
It was always wrong to engage in conquest.
Then we can go all the way back to ancient Rome.
Yes.
But what does that have to do with the situation between...
Yeah, okay. So, again, this guy has cuckold brain. So, because he projects himself as part of, like, a long lineage of glorious Hearts of Iron 4 civs or whatever, like, because this guy thinks entirely in the board game Risk, he thinks, like, Well, you can't say warfare is unethical. If you do, then you'll have to say that the glorious progenitors of our civilization are unethical. Yes. Well, you can't do that. Why can't we just say, like, hey, history is made up of a great fabric of people doing good and bad things, and this is a bad thing, and it's had a lot of influence on how the world is today, but that doesn't mean that it's morally good. Like, things can be morally bad and influential. There's nothing inconsistent about believing that. Ah, have fun. Thank you. But then he doesn't get to idealize his daddies. I just think that he thinks of himself as, like, maybe not necessarily, like, a bloodline, but, like, an ideological line of enlightened gentle sirs who understand that the world is a grim place, and he has to do what he has to do, and what must be done, and these peasant-brained individuals cannot comprehend the moral necessity of killing 5 bajillion Indians in the Bengal famine or whatever. Yeah, it's like a guy who reads Warhammer 40k books, but takes them, like, seriously. No, it literally is that. Yeah, this would be like the kind of guy who would read like the books and go like, you know, yeah, the Imperium does what it does to defend mankind. There is no other way, and like be like the worst guy to meet at the game shops. You know what I'm talking about, right? Boobin, you having fun with my phone charger? Oh yes, you are. Yeah. This is what spreads the light of civilization. Baby. Beep. Yeah? Yep. Right on my cheek. He better enjoy kicking my cheek while he can. You know I'm down 8 pounds? Since 2 weeks ago? Must be a lot of water weight. I'm down to 222. I haven't been this light in ages.
What does that have to do with the situation between the monarch and the people of Ireland? I think it's just a distraction from the question at hand.
The question at hand is, do you want their entire system of government to be as dysfunctional as the part that is currently elected?
The government here doesn't even...
Wait, is he implying that the King of Ireland is like doing all this super competent shit, and then it's like the elected government is everything up, like, or like in the UK or whatever, like you look over and like the British Parliament, oh, they get nothing done, which to be fair, true. And then on the other hand, you look at the king, and the king is like, oh, the king is like the shining exemplar of leadership, and totally not like an inbred retard pedophile.
Even exist. It can't form. That's how dysfunctional it is. At least in the Republic, they have a government.
It's easy to look competent when you don't do anything.
That's better.
But you're a monarchist. How can you be a libertarian and a monarchist? I don't understand.
The same way you can be a libertarian and a Republican. The form of a government and the extent of a government are two different things, and generally, historically, it's monarchic governments that have been less oppressive.
But the point of government under monarchy is to take power away from the crown and to make the system more democratic. If you apply libertarianism to a monarchy, you just get absolute rule under the crown, don't you?
No, you don't. The purpose of the government is not to take power away from the crown. It is to share power with the crown, to manage events.
How is that meaningfully different?
Jibber jabber.
Is the purpose of the Supreme Court to take power away from the legislature? No, they are two co-equal branches. Do your lungs exist to take oxygen away from your heart? No, they are two co-equal organs.
So this is another okay, a bit of sociology cred here. When people use analogies like that, it's a gigantic fascism alarm bell. People use the body politic like semantically, but when people start making actual comparisons between the government and like functions of an organ, it speaks really heavily towards like old fascist rhetoric. There's a mode of sociological analysis called structural functionalism, which is for cuckolds. And the basic gist of it is you analyze things based on their purpose and presumed purpose within a system. So a structural functionalist might look at police brutality and say, well, the reason why police engage in police brutality is because the law does not give them enough leeway to accomplish their jobs within the normal purview of behavior, so they have to act brutal to protect us. Like, structural functionalism is basically assume this thing has a reason to exist for itself. Now give it that reason. Like presuppose the justification. I'm being a bit uncharitable here, but I don't give a because I hate this mode of analysis. And it's really, really common with conservative thinking because it's all about status quo warrior defense shit, where it's like, oh, well, this system exists, so it must exist for a reason. This guy keeps doing it over and over again. Oh, colonialism exists. Well, it must exist for a reason. And what he's doing right there, the idea of like the body politic being like the organs of a body or whatever, like the legislative and executive or whatever. The reason that's a big alarm bell is because it presupposes not only like the mutual dependence of these systems, but the innate existence and need for the existence of these systems. Does that make any sense? Can you understand how it's a little bit more essentialist to go like, oh yeah, the Fuhrer isn't just our leader, he is the heart of our nation, much as the, you know, the Schutzstaffel are the, like, you know, red blood cells of our nation. Like, you're not only like doing analogy, you're folding it back into like we're all the same blood. And that does fit pretty well within fascist rhetoric. I don't think this guy's actually a fascist, though. I think he's ideologically incoherent, so he's going to occasionally dip into fascist rhetoric while he's doing, like, monarchy apologia. It's complicated.
Both have to function for your body to work. Just as the king and parliament are two co-equal governmental organs that must function for the good of the nation.
Mm-hmm. See?
I'm not entirely opposed to democracy.
I'm
not entirely opposed to monarchism. I think we need a reasonable mix of both. I think we should have a bicameral legislature where the upper house is a combination of hereditary peers and life peers, where the lower house is elected from among the various constituencies, where the head of state is a monarch to whom the military swears allegiance, and in which we also have an independent court.
Okay, gotta remind you though, I'm not an American. I've never been American, because you said it was my Supreme Court.
I'm American.
There is a Supreme Court in Northern Ireland, isn't there? I'm going to check exactly what it's called. I think that
structural functionalists acknowledge dysfunctions within institutions. Sometimes, man, I've read some takes from structural functionalists, both in and out of university, that made me cringe so hard. Because, like, what is or isn't a dysfunction is kind of determined by whether or not you're giving leeway to, like whether or not you think it's like an acceptable deviation from the nominal purpose of an institution, and that really depends on how charitable you are to the institution. At the very least, can we acknowledge that it's very conservative, like innately, to think like, okay, well, the cops exist, so they must exist for a reason. Like, if your presupposition is, well, everything is as it should be, fundamentally. Oh my. Vaush Marx did a lot of structural functionalist analysis, so it's not all bad or conservative. I'm not saying it's all bad or conservative. And also, a lot of the structural functionalist analysis that Marx did was in the broader context of understanding how these things work within a dysfunctional system. They do exist for a reason, but it doesn't mean it's a good reason. Okay, when a person says, oh, that thing? Well, I know it seems bad, but they exist for a reason. Don't you think that by default, that would be considered a kind of apologism? Like, not always, because if you asked me, do the cops exist for a reason, I would say yes, and then elaborate. But most of the time, when people talk about things existing for a reason, it's in the purview of defending them as a kind of, like, innate institution. I'm not saying it's, like, all innately bad or whatever. I'm just saying I've seen a lot of shit from that particular sociological lens of analysis. Okay, sorry.
There is it may just be called the High Court. Supreme Court of Northern Ireland. High Court, sorry. There is a High Court. There's the King's Bench. The Court of Appeal is the highest court.
Well, yeah, but is that different from saying the concept? Bunny, do you not realize that when I raise my voice like this, it means the conversation is over? What are you doing? Jesus! End up dysfunctional due to optimizations against material reality, structural function. I'm just saying, I've seen lots of... If you do structural functionalist analysis and you're not cucked, then I'm not talking about you. You're safe.
In Northern Ireland, I always forget what they're called, and they change it every couple of years, but it is the Court of Appeal. So your Court of Appeal in Northern Ireland is separate from the legislature, but that's exactly what we would want, isn't it? We would want these separate branches of government, neither to be capable of completely overpowering the other. It doesn't mean that the job of one is to destroy or take power from the other. They both should work in unison, just like your heart and your lungs work in unison.
He loves doing that, huh?
Okay. I guess I'm just like getting confused from the point that this started at.
Keffals isn't wrong to be confused. This guy's ideology is incoherent. It's just a string of nearly unrelated justifications that all chain together to form a broad and inconsistent defense of the concept of authoritarianism. So I don't blame her at all for feeling that way. I wish you'd call him out on that. No, she's being chill, and that's fine. I often find that in conversations with people like this, you have to be really chill and laid back, because everyone is already biased against them, because it's literally your audience that are watching. Like, nobody watching me right now is thinking like, oh, Keffals is on the back foot, you know? He's basically just rambling, and it's kind of like a form of entertainment, and if you come at it too hard, it makes you look like a blowhard, or like you can't handle his truth or whatever. This is one of the reasons why people like Alex Jones love it when people get flustered talking to him, you know? Because, like, even if Alex Jones says a million billion horribly stupid things, you're kind of playing into his game a little bit. If you're like, no, that's not true, you can't say that, that's ridiculous of you to say, like, because once you start leaning into that, you know, you're kind of giving them more leeway than they deserve. Yeah, it's like, let them hang themselves with their own rope, right? Like, give them the rope to hang themselves with, that kind of thing. How about my riveting Minecraft gameplay, huh? I haven't played this game in like a decade, so like all the people are like, oh my god, his movement is so unoptimized, oh my god, and I'm just like, haha, I found a diamond.
Yes, the point being, would you like to become a right...
Well, oh, by the way, did they make diamond more rare? Like, actual question, because I remember that, like, back when I played ages and ages and ages ago, I could go down to, like, bedrock level plus 11 or 12 or whatever, and then walk around for a bit, and then get, like, 20 diamond. But now I feel like I don't find veins of 8 anymore. I find veins of 1 or maybe 2. I mean, I'm pretty deep, right? What am I at? It's F3? Oh, God. Where's the negative 20? Yeah, it goes into the negatives now. Gotta go deeper? Okay, sure. We've kind of explored out this area, haven't we? Might as well go deeper. Down to like negative 60? Okay. I don't want to strip mine, though. I want to explore. Exploring is fun. We also need more coal and iron and gold and stuff. We're under a Badlands biome, so there's tons of gold up in higher elevations. I'll check out this area a bit, and then I'm gonna, like, try to head down that strip with the ladder. You know, explore some more.
Right winger?
No, I absolutely would not. You've spent this conversation defending colonialism and genocide. And you won't... And I think that you're someone who can't actually stand...
Oh, actually, really quickly, before we do that, do you guys want to see the super cute desert village that I'm kind of leaning on now? Hold on. Where did I come down from? Oh boy, this might take a bit. I think it's somewhere in this direction. No, I'll explore this first, then I'll go back. Because it's a really cute village.
by their beliefs, like, quite honestly. Because you wouldn't answer the question about whether or not you want a human pet.
I would argue that question is outside the scope of this discussion.
I think that question is very relevant to the discussion.
Hey!
Of whether or not it would be a good idea for you to be a right winger?
Yes.
Okay, I may have a few kinks, and they may, to some extent, have influenced my politics, but I don't see why that's super relevant.
Wait, how did that influence your politics?
That's a horrifying sentence.
So is, like, the monarchy thing actually, like, based on the kink of ownership of people?
No.
Oh
I'm
boy.
saying I can't completely rule out the possibility that the point it doesn't matter. Why is it relevant?
You just said that it is relevant. You said that it actually informs your politics.
I'm saying I can't say with certainty that it doesn't, because no man entirely knows the internals of his own mind.
I do, actually.
And can you be sure that none of your kinks have impacted your politics?
I can be
Oh, they
sure that they
definitely
do.
have.
Yeah.
Well,
100%.
again, we don't need to go into the specifics, but there you go. They're not especially relevant to the why someone believes in their specific political beliefs isn't necessarily all that relevant. Wait,
here, it's got to be over here,
wait,
right?
is there a kink-based reason that you, for some reason, believe monarchies are authoritarian?
No, not really. I mean, I think they are.
You have political beliefs that are outside of your.
I think that you're just like okay with the.
Tastes.
I don't understand why you're against authoritarianism when you advocate for authoritarianism. It feels like a contradiction of beliefs.
I advocate for monarchism. I don't think monarchism is inherently authoritarian.
I don't think that you can have a system where people are immune from legal proceedings and the Constitution, and it be democratic.
But functionally, you do have that in a lot of democracies. Do you think it's likely Kim Jong-un is ever going to be accused of a crime, or a sitting American president?
Democracy? Hello?
Handcuffs?
Kim Jong-un is a monarchist.
No, he's not.
Yes, he is.
Why would he go to him as an He is literally a hereditary monarch. They praise the family. Why would you go to that? Why? This guy's wacky. This guy's sipping a lot of wacky Kool-Aid. Whoops, wrong thing. This is a wacky guy. Don't we love our wacky dudes? Isn't the world a better place for there being wacky dudes? Like, wouldn't life be just a little boring? Not like this. Not like this. I see. I think I'm done at this level. We're getting so far out from where the mine shaft is that I'm like, if I die, I really don't want to lose the stuff I'm carrying. So I'm gonna head up then and deposit my stuff and show you the village.
He's the third in the bloodline of the absolute rulers of North Korea.
That is officially a coincidence.
How is it functionally different? The only difference is that it's an absolute monarchy.
Well, no, he didn't ascend to power because his dad was the previous supreme leader. That is officially just a coincidence.
How is that
oh man, guys, we talked about this before. We talked about this yesterday. Procedural fascism versus like frenzy fascism or whatever, where the procedural fascist arrives at the same conclusion as the frenzied fascist, but through like bureaucracy. And that's what he's doing right now, you know? Like, oh yeah, we have a hereditary monarchy, you know, but like nominally that's not the case. It's just a coincidence that they've had the supreme leadership be passed down through like the bloodline, you know? It's the obsession with like a narrative as a displacement tool. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, it's like a case study. Yeah, because you can imagine this guy's arguments being made by someone who's a lot more blood and soil, right? Couldn't you? Somebody being like, you know, well, the people of our land have always needed a strong ruler. But instead, he's like, no, well, actually, I think it would be like really democratic and good, actually, if, you know, like, you know, we had all of these monarchs leading us and stuff. And it's like, wow, you're arriving at the same conclusions, but like through a different kind of lunacy. Bro, can you tell me how this guy is not fascist? Well, he probably is, but the stuff he's saying is too incoherent and jittery to pin it down to that specifically. Forgot to mention, Vaush, this is the guy that unironically defends Caesar's Legion, so there's that. That does not surprise me at all. Yeah. That's pretty funny.
Coincidence. In which process then did he ascend to power? Like 3 generations of family as the absolute rulers in North Korea. That's monarchy. It can have a different name, but it is functionally the same.
none of them had crowns, none of them claimed the government as their personal property, and none of them claimed right to rule on the basis of bloodline. It just has.
See, it's the obsession with there being a like a legal procedural excuse, like you know, oh, you may have 99.999% of a monarchy together. Vaush, he's trolling. No, I don't think he is. I guess he might be, but I don't think he is. Can you enchant shields? Can you fuck off? Yes? Okay. Oh, it's sunrise. Unbreaking and mending? Okay, we'll make an unbreaking one at some point. I don't have, yeah, I don't have an unbreaking booklet. Yeah, an obsession with self-ID and symbols. I think the earlier bit, there's the village. I think the earlier bit on self-ID was really funny and telling because this guy is obsessed with it. Hold on. To the Bat Cave. Da-na-na-na-na-na. I got it. I'll clean up this path soon, okay? I know it's ugly right now.
Happens that they were related, and there have been plenty of republics where leaders have been related. I mean, look at the Bush family in the USA, for example.
Right? I mean, the Bush family, those were elected people.
Hey, stuff slacker, stop. I never say anything about Christianity. There's actually, I admire a lot of monarchs that aren't necessarily Christian. I think the monarch of Thailand is pretty cool. He's not a Christian.
Oh, God.
I don't know.
Thailand is insane. You can't even criticize the monarch publicly in Thailand. How could you defend that?
Look, there's coral in the middle of the village.
I didn't say...
Isn't that cute?
I didn't say I necessarily defended his position on free speech. I just thought he was pretty cool.
Wait, how can you think he's pretty cool? Given that, given how ruthless he is.
Out of partisan politics, he just doesn't like being, slandered.
That's definitely not staying out of politics. That's actively censoring dissent.
Partisan politics. He's not choosing one political party over another, and I think it's a good idea to have.
Dude, I'm not political. I'll just throw you in jail for criticizing me, okay? Dude, I'm completely apolitical, all right? Just like if you criticize me, I'll have you and your whole family and your everything thrown in jail. And dude, it's fine. He literally has his own political party. Yeah, but like he hasn't said that he's political.
A head of state who is non-partisan.
I mean, that is probably ideal. But at the same time, you're advocating for a system where you don't get to choose that. You just have to hope for it.
Because if people can choose it, it very often ends up becoming partisan. Partisan politics, unless it's a very, very strict... unless there's basically no way for...
By the way, is the idea of a non-partisan president/monarch fake? Yes. There's no such thing as a non-political political leader. The most that you can get is apolitical within a given context. So I've said, for instance, that I would consider the Pentagon to be largely apolitical in the sense that its one overriding goal is America, defend America. And like outside of that, I don't think that the Pentagon would be that concerned with like, okay, well, is it, you know, it's a stability first approach, which is political, of course. What we're really talking about here is like proceduralism. And this guy is a proceduralist, if ever I have seen one. He leans into it so hard, in a way that most monarchists don't. But again, you know, it's all special snowflake politics, right?
For it to be handed out as spoils, like the outcome of a referendum.
Pro-monarchy is partisan.
I'm gonna trade so much goddamn
very much
paper.
Partisan.
Which political party is pro-monarchy in the UK?
The DUP.
I've never voted for the DUP.
DUP.
That is the pro-monarchist party in Northern Ireland. That is very much a partisan party.
Has the king officially endorsed them?
Has the king officially endorsed the DUP? Good question, actually.
Okay, we need more coal.
No, he's stayed out of that issue.
Okay, wait, hold on, really quickly. I'm sorry. Can't you farm coal, but not really with dried kelp? Wait, hold on. Minecraft fuel. Because the more stuff I can farm, the better, right? Okay, what? Hold on. Items smelted. Wood blocks, sapling, sticks, coal, charcoal is 8. Lava bucket is 100, but that's like annoying. Coal block, okay, but that's just coal. Blaze rod is 10. Why is dried kelp block? Question mark, question mark. What? Why? How much? Bad wiki? Oh, you're right. This is the wrong wiki. Hold on. Dried kelp block. I'm learning so much stuff about this game. There we go. This is the real wiki. Flammable, yes, 30. Okay. So that's cool. You need to automate the kelp farm. I don't really want to automate anything. I kind of like... So you need to cook the... Wait. How much building automatic farms can be fun? It's not really my thing, but I get that. Okay, wait, hold on. Just tell me how much shit this burns. Able to smelt 20 items. So you need to smelt 9 items, the kelp, and then craft it in order to get something that smelts 20 items. A tree farm would be easier. Yeah, but farming trees is annoying. But you can use the dried kelp to smelt more dried kelp. I guess you can just create like an infinite... You can use campfires to get dried kelp without using coal. What the fuck is a campfire?
And I actually think it's a little bit unreasonable for a political party which aspires to form His Majesty's government to be anti the king.
Hello?
Uh-huh.
Still there?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
still there. I think my internet may have conked out.
Oh, I'm very sorry.
Oh
no. He's
so
dead.
yes, but as I've said, a lot of the left-wing groups that you're a part of have this tendency to cancel their own. I think ContraPoints got into a bunch of cancellation scandals. So has Vaush. So has Hassan Piker.
Hey, I know that guy.
I think there was even a rumor about Philosophy Tube having sexually assaulted someone. My point is, this seems to be a trend among you left-wingers to cancel one another. Wouldn't you rather be part of a political movement that didn't do that?
As opposed to hereditary monarchs, a group not known for fighting with each other. God almighty.
Do I have to be a human pet?
No.
Well, that's kind of sad.
You don't have to. You don't even have to detransition. We've got people like Blair White who are transgender.
Blair White is a monarchist? She's considering it. She's like, well, hold on.
I'm sorry. I can't join the right. That's a bit silly. I think you're a very silly...
Oh, okay, wait. So it's literally just about joining the right? Wait, quick question, okay? Really quick, important question. Why on earth would the human pet guy, like, ever, and I truly mean ever, what? Oh, hello. Ooh. Why would he get along with other right-wingers? Wouldn't he find them just as detestable? Bum, 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 bum. All right, good luck, friend. If you have a saddle, you can ride him. Now, we got mining to do.
Silly man.
Do I want to do a charcoal farm or a kelp farm? What's better?
I don't think that's entirely fair, but why do you want to keep being part of a political movement that seems so determined to eat its own, is my question.
I want to try kelp.
We have a positive vision for the future. We have an idea of what the world could be like.
I don't think you're actually... I don't think you're going to find much agreement from, like, American Republicans on the monarchy. They very much...
not agreement, but they don't tend to cancel. American Republicans can get on just fine with British monarchists, and they can debate civilly and not try to cancel each other. There is a fairly broad spectrum of disagreement on the right. We encourage healthy and respectful debate, and we don't constantly try to cancel each other, even though we do have disagreements of opinion, just as some of you leftists do.
Right. I mean, I disagree with very much the core of what they stand for. I disagree with authoritarianism, including monarchy.
Again, what do you think is meant by the word authoritarianism? We are possibly arguing at cross purposes. When you say authoritarianism, what does that mean?
I think unelected people making decisions on unelected people making decisions in government is absolutely authoritarian.
Authoritarianism is actually really difficult to nail down, definition-wise, because you can come close, and then you'll go like, oh, wait, well, there's this other thing, and then you'll, like, amend the definition with another thing. It can actually be really, really difficult to get down, you know? Because a leader can be popular, democratically elected, and operating with the public will and still be authoritarian. It's really complicated. It is a vague term for sure, which is why I try not to use it that much. Like, fascism is a vague term, and I think it's far more purposeful than just authoritarian. But that doesn't mean that things, like, aren't authoritarian, you know? Like, obviously, I still think there's value in using the term when it's applicable. I don't know what kelp looks like. Is this the kelp? These, like, big strings coming up from the... Is this it? This is? Okay, gotcha. I need to make a minecart that goes down here, and I need to start a big... Oh? Do they float up? No, they float down. Hey, how do I get water breathing on a helmet? That'd be kind of nice. Wait, do they just float wherever? Slowly they will float back up. Can you plant them on any sand blocks, or does it have to be in an ocean biome? Well, that's quite a lot of them. Like, could I, like... in water? Okay, so if I had them in parallel rows with one gap between, and then I had, like, signposts to block water in the places I could walk through, could I just, like, really easily knock a bunch of them out? Yeah? In theory? Okay, okay. How do you, what am I looking for here? What term? How do you plant water at multiple levels? Like, I know that if you, like, you could do a layer, then dig down, and then the water will be flowing down. It won't be just down. Does that make sense? Kelp automatically turns flowing water above it into source? Wait, really? So if you just dug straight down, put a sand block, planted water 10 blocks up so the water just flows straight down, and then planted kelp at the very bottom, it would grow up and convert all that to source water? Really? Cool. Okay. Well, if that's the case, then I'm going to make a kelp farm right now. Now that I have some starter.
Like, the Chinese Communist Party is not elected. It's an authoritarian government. The king is not elected. That's an authoritarian position to have.
So it has absolutely nothing to do with how much power the government has or how often it exercises it. As far as you're concerned, it's just a matter of why they're in power.
Oh yeah, as long as there's a state, then yes, people are going to have the power of the state exercised over them.
So, in principle, if a ruler were to rule, like, say, Vlad the Impaler, but be elected, it would be not authoritarian.
I don't know what the context is that you're bringing this up in. I actually don't know what Vlad the Impaler did. But I also don't understand.
I don't either,
because,
to be honest.
Like, I don't know, if a monarchy just went out today and decided to set up shop.
He impaled people? Well, shit, I've done that.
In an indigenous, uncontacted tribe's
in
neighborhood,
their pussy,
and then conquer them and set a puppet government up, you would probably say that's just bringing civilization to them.
The indigenous uncontacted tribe is almost certainly already a monarchy. Do you think that there's that these
Yeah, but that doesn't answer
the
that doesn't actually address the point that you think that displays of force and taking over other nations is fine. It's just acceptable.
How else would civilization spread? Civilization didn't takes ages to spontaneously manifest.
No, I think that might
how it spreads.
I think that might and right.
This is one of the reasons why politically. So I'm not joking when I say this. I make a lot of jokes, but this isn't a joke. Okay, I actually believe that Civ games are morally irresponsible in the way they're normally delivered. The idea that a lot of young men have that civilization is a tech tree, or some civs are higher on the tech tree and their expansion is some kind of innate good. A lot of people don't seem to understand, but like this was made pretty clear, at least I felt, back when I used to play Civ 4, which is the perspective here is like this amoral, whatever grows your civ is the good thing. Oh, slavery increases your production or whatever. Conscription helps you get riflemen out quickly. Like, whatever, dude, that's how it is. But a lot of people look at that and they're like, oh, yeah, this is how it has to be done. No, it isn't, you buffoon. You virgin. Jesus. I guess I'll put a third parallel rail here. No. Because then how would I redstone power it? It would have to be a non-parallel rail? Like, one over? From beneath? Yeah, I guess that's true. Could I do one to the left here? I kind of don't want to. These are like my village ones. And then like over here I could have... Doesn't have to go very far. Alright, don't mind me.
Rhetoric is what led to the development of fascism.
And what led to the collapse of fascism? Oh yeah, it was the giant colonial empires that fought the fascists.
Colonial... We didn't need to do the colonialism to beat the Nazis. What kind of logic is that? That would be like you're like getting mugged by someone in the park, and somebody's like running up and say like, "Oh, I'll save you," and then like on the way over, he like decks a baby in the face, and then he saves you from the mugging, and you're like, "Why the f did you deck that baby?" He's like, "Whoa, how else would I have saved you? How else would I have been able to reach you in time? It was necessary." Insane, man. This is, ironically, a very Stalinist take. Yes, it is. Yes, very much so.
What led to the...
Like that Winston Churchill bloke you earlier decried.
Go? Oh, by a good bit.
Wait, no, the UK didn't stop the Nazis. That's not true.
Yeah, I think the Luftwaffe, after the Battle of Britain, might disagree.
Nope, it was overwhelmingly the Soviets. Overwhelmingly. It was the Soviets and the incompetence of the Nazis that led to the downfall of the Nazis. And the Soviets were not a colonial empire. Well, wait, at that time they had... Okay, the Soviets defeated the Nazis in the process of becoming a Wait, shit, we're making this point. The Soviets literally beat the Nazis by creating the colonial empire. That was when they... Oh my god, that was when the Soviet Union expanded, because they kept the territory they... Okay, alright, I'm on this guy's side now. Only through brutal colonialism were the Nazis able to be defeated. Zoomies. You lost this debate? True. I lost this debate. There was no way the Soviets could have won without brutally conquering all that territory and not giving it back up afterwards.
The fact that it's...
Like, during the Second World...
The Soviet Union was a colonial empire before that. Yeah, but, like, we definitely can't deny the fact that, like, they got a lot bigger and a lot worse, after World War II, you know? Shit, okay, so I can't go this far.
War.
A significant percentage of our Civ-related subreddits revealed themselves to be monarchists, like 40%. Thought you really hit that point in the head. Cheers. 40% of Civ subreddits in, like, a poll? Holy shit!
They were already starving out their allies in India, to the point that the Soviet Union had to intervene and redirect shipments of grain to Bengal.
Where did that grain come from, I wonder? Was it Ukraine, perhaps?
What?
I mean, yeah, Stalin was an authoritarian dictator. I didn't have to defend them to point out the fact that that was a terrible thing.
But Stalin was an elected
I think the yes, I know. I don't agree with him. He was a dictator.
You just said that if he's elected, he's not authoritarian. Your definition of authoritarian
Joseph Stalin wasn't elected. The Communist Party of the Soviet Union was not elected. They came
How
to.
did they select their next leader?
How did they select their next leader? Through internal.
They had a vote.
Oh, if you have an internal vote in an
yeah,
unelected party, that doesn't count. That's not representative of the people's will. You can't gauge people on who they want to be their leader based on an internal vote of bureaucrats at the highest level.
The vast majority of the Russian population at that point was either openly at war, in the case of the whites, or was made of illiterate peasants.
Wait, we're talking about World War. We're talking about World War II. We were talking about the Bengal famine.
Yep, at that point in history. So you're saying that Joseph Stalin was unelected. What would have constituted an elect? I'm genuinely asking you. What more democratic process could the Soviets have gone through upon Lenin's death to have elected a leader?
Having a multi-party democracy and voting powers.
This is where we'll build our
the average person.
The population was on. The average person in Russia at that point was an illiterate peasant.
And that makes it so that they have no say. Why?
I'm sorry, you're going to set up polling stations for these people? Some of them way out in rural Siberia?
Yes.
Like, I do not like the Soviets. I think it was absolutely unacceptable.
Wait, literally, yes. Like, we had, again, not a good democracy, landowning white males, but, like, a ton of people in America were illiterate back when we, like, started the voting process. I mean, that's why they were holding literacy tests that they had to have a grandfather clause for after the Civil War in the South. Because it was like, you know, even after black men and non-landowning men could vote, it was like, oh, yeah, well, a lot of these people can't read. Yeah. I think that realistically, what should have happened is that Lenin should have held an interim government because Russia at the time was not capable of, like, immediately holding an election for him or whatever. And then during that time, he should have bolstered and strengthened the workers' councils, and he should have tried to establish, like, basic premises of educational attainment and so on across the nation. And in so doing, he could have, like, set the stage to have allowed for a real democratic election. I think that if Lenin was a real communist like me, he would have done that, and it would have been good, personally, in my opinion. We'll deal with that later. You guys all see what I'm going to do, right? This is where it enters, and then there's going to be a big pool, and there's going to be sand at the bottom, and then I'm going to put the kelp down there in rows, and then I'm going to put signs to block the water from entering the rows at the bottom, because I'm going to dig this down. You know what I mean? That's cool. It doesn't have to be sand. Yeah, but sand is cool. Wait, is what I'm doing lame as f right now? Should I be doing a kelp farm that, like... I think what I'm doing is lame right now. Why is this underground? I don't want to do this underground. I want this to be above ground. It's hard to access right now. It's cramped and claustrophobic. I want to build it next to my farm. I don't want it to be underground. I just did this by default because I'm a dwarf. We're going upstairs after I get this coal. The USSR was not the overwhelming reason for the defeat of the Nazis in World War II. Without the US, the USSR would have been toothless. No, I disagree. I agree that tankies play it up quite a lot, and I think that a lot of them are bullshitting when they do. But if you take a look at, like, resources invested and people lost in World War II, like, hold on. Casualties, World War II by country. Like, the amount invested by the Soviet Union is literally more than an order of magnitude. Look, World War II casualties, right there at the top, Soviet Union and China. Like, look at the United States right here. And then look at the Soviet Union and China. China lost tens of millions of people to Imperial Japan, and the Soviet Union lost tens of millions of people to the Nazi invasion. And then Poland, of course, overwhelmingly lost civilians to the Holocaust. I don't actually know much about Indonesia, but they definitely suffered from the Japanese. Like, dude, look at that, man. Like, 4 million Indonesians dead. That was definitely the Japanese. But I don't know anything about it. Like, I don't... And the little blue line here is people died as percent of population. So Poland lost just over 18% of their entire population. Lithuania nearly 14%, you know? The Soviet Union, for all of its millions of people, lost over 10% of their population. Oh, sure, well, I'm glad we did, Archwave. Vaush, more allied civs were killed than Axis civs? Yeah, oh yeah, but massively so, yeah. There's a reason British intelligence, American steel, and Soviet blood exists. Yeah. That's, yeah. It's complicated. But you know what? I'm glad we all work together on this one, okay? I really don't like Nazis. All right.
Acceptable for them to kill the Romanovs.
Okay,
I
I'm
think
leaving
Russia
this
should
place.
have continued to be a Romanov-led monarchy. But if you're going to accept them killing the Romanovs, let's be very clear about the practical realities. There was absolutely no way they could have had any sort of election that would have satisfied you. It would have been a complete practical impossibility. They were a majority illiterate population of isolated farmsteaders.
See, this is like the thing that you do where it's like the topic of genocide comes up and you manage to divert the topic because you know you're in the wrong. You can't defend it. Like, I bring it up and then you start going off about Romans and ancient Greek civilization.
That's true.
And that has nothing to do with the topic at hand.
Completely correct, yeah. This guy's default response whenever anything gets dicey or he has to answer to the crimes of his ideology is either, well, it's not like things are good under democracy either, that's one, or two, this, like, abstract civilization lingo, you know, move away from the raw reality of the situation and towards this abstract jibber-jabber nonsense. It makes me so happy that Haas hates the fact that I use that term. It's such a good term. It's his greatest contribution to ideological discourse. Is that specific term. And God bless him for it. Actually outweighs everything he's ever done or said. Like, I'm like a Haas stan. In the year of, like, 2032, he has, like, a fez on. He's doing, like, a monkey grinder bit for applause. And I'm like, haha, I remember when he said jibber jabber. That was pretty great. And I'm like clapping. Yeah. It's not even his lol. Whatever. Terms belong to the people. Okay. He stole it from Sam Cedar? Oh, damn. Your house is magnificent. I want to build a really big, like, Adobe house right here that overlooks all of this. That's the plan. It just takes me a while to get to it. Like, overlooks this and overlooks this. Adobe? Sorry, what's the term? Not Adobe, or the big, like, with terracotta and stuff. I don't want to farm lava with a dripstone block. I don't want to use any farms. That was my rule setting out. If I want to play Factorio, I'll play Factorio, you know? I want to expand this. Because this is, like, the fastest thing to trade with villagers, kind of, right? At least for me. This grows pretty fast, and you just collect it. You don't have to replant it. With the farm, you have to replant it. That sucks. You know, like, having to go back and manually plant everything all slow. This is cool, though. Sticks are way faster. Eh.
Well, I think it very much
I'm
does.
trying to get watermelon and pumpkin
argument
seeds
is that
as well.
Stalin was bad because he was authoritarian. I would agree with that.
Yes, he was the leader of an unelected. He was a leader of an unelected government, and he committed ethnic cleansing against the population.
That is where I disagree. I would say he was authoritarian in terms of how much power he had and how he exercised it. In terms of how he came to power, simply put, one.
Sorry for being retarded. Do you think that I should build the kelp farm up here, like dig 10 blocks down in a big grid and then fill it up, and then I could just go over here? Or do you think I should build it down in the strip of water right over here? I kind of like doing it elevated. This biome is really ugly. Hard disagree. I think that the Badlands biome is beautiful. I thought you hated being told what to do. I'm asking for opinions. I'm not asking you to tell me what to do. I don't know, having like a big square dugout here sounds kind of fun, don't you think? Not there or whatever, but like right here. If there's a two-way path, it would begin right here, right? Right, like a big square. You all get what I'm... Okay, whatever. I think it's a good idea.
Once they'd killed the Romanovs, once Lenin was dead, There
Yes.
was no other practical way for them to select a leader except to have an internal election.
You are a
rest of the
monarchist.
country
You
was-
literally believe in a system where the head of state can dissolve government. What the fuck are you talking about, dude?
Yes, I absolutely think they should have just left the Romanovs in power. I think they should never have taken the Romanovs out of power. They should never have become a communist country. Once
They
they
never
did,
were.
though, there was absolutely no way at that point at the point of where they had to choose.
That has
Stalin
no.
as a
What does that
leader,
have to do
they
with the
couldn't-
Bengal famine? Why is that acceptable? Why do you have to go and pivot every time? We're talking about people who died because the UK government has
Because the UK government redistributed resources during
a famine.
during a war. A famine that occurred
Like Winston
during a war.
Churchill
Let's be very clear.
was quoted saying that he hates Indians and that they're a beastly people with a beastly religion and that it's their own fault for starving because they breed like rabbits. He is a monster.
Well, he wasn't very politically correct, but come on, this was like the 1940s.
See, I could.
So I said earlier he's racist, and I'm not exactly a genius wizard for pointing that one out. But what he just admitted with that line is that he agrees with Winston Churchill. He just thinks that Winston Churchill was inelegant in saying it. He agrees with what Winston Churchill said. He does think that the Indians were a beastly people who deserved their death because they bred like rabbits. Yeah, he's just saying like, well, you know, he shouldn't have said it like that or something to that effect. You don't say? Yeah.
Like concede on your point. Yeah, it's like the 1940s. People are evil. He starved millions of people to death.
By sending food out during a war?
Sending food? Yeah, by taking food away from the colony that was having a famine. And then saying he doesn't care because he hates Indians.
So what would you have preferred him to do, Keffals?
I would have preferred him not to export food during an active famine.
Wow. You say it was authoritarian of him to do that?
Would I say it's authoritarian? Yes, because it was a colony.
He was
where
elected.
That
He was an elected
he was
leader,
ruling
Keffals.
over a colony. Like, there was no democracy in India. They didn't choose that. They were conquered. That is authoritarian. If you conquer another state and rule over them, that is an authoritarian government. They had absolute control over India.
Keffals, by that definition, every single government that has had a vassal state would be authoritarian.
Yes!
That's most governments throughout history.
Yes!
Most governments
That's
throughout
a
history.
definition of authoritarian.
What is he seriously balking at the idea of most governments throughout history being authoritarian? Obviously, democracy is an enlightenment value. What do you? Yeah, obviously, of course, clearly, unambiguously.
That's so broad as to be almost useless. Almost no governments have been non-authoritarian
Yes!
by that definition.
You're getting it!
But that's insane. That would make it almost practically impossible to ever actually have an expansionist empire at all.
Yes.
Yeah, we don't want an expansionist empire. That is exactly what needs to die.
I'm in favor of expansionist empires as long as they're not authoritarian.
You can't have that. That's a contradiction. You can't have a non-authoritarian empire. Empires need conflict to survive.
Again, this is Hearts of Iron 4 ideology. I know it seems like none of this makes sense, but in his mind, like, the way a civilization grows and grows stronger is by spread. Like, it's literally like video game brain, like tech tree brain. That's why he's, like, thinking of it this way. I know it seems completely dogshit insane, which, of course, it is. I'm not denying that, but like that's the ideology he's operating on. Yeah, you know, like it's all a grand game of strategy, and would the world only be better were I one of the strategists? That bullshit.
We need blood.
Life needs conflict to survive.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Fascism.
So when the British Empire in India made it illegal to burn widows, was that authoritarian or non-authoritarian?
Wait, they made it illegal to burn widows?
Yeah, it was an accepted practice at the time to burn widows until the British Empire made it illegal. For that matter, when the British Empire went to the various feuding principalities of West Africa, such as the Kingdom of Dahomey, and made it illegal to trade in slaves, was that authoritarian? That was one state exerting influence over another. Was that authoritarian?
So this is, okay, people love to try to trip up with this, and there's an obvious answer to this, okay? Authoritarian governments can impose non-authoritarian rules. So it's possible for a government that is completely authoritarian to make a ruling that is on like a non-authoritarian ruling. Like it's very easy to imagine that. For instance, you can have a democratic government with a democratically elected ruler start imposing authoritarian laws. You can have an authoritarian ruler impose non-authoritarian laws. Yes. So you could argue, even if the banning of slavery is not an authoritarian decision, the government that is putting that forward is still an authoritarian government. Simple.
Keffals?
Wait, I mean, what the point here is that they exerted power over another state to make it so that they can't do something that is morally questionable? Because what are the other things?
Power over another state to ensure that the rights of individual people were respected. And indeed, I would note when they were talking about exports in Bengali famine, were they forcing Indian farmers to sell their crops, or were they just paying a higher price to individual Indian farmers?
I mean,
Was their authoritarianism in effect just outbidding individual Indian suppliers?
If you control the government and you are doing that, yes. Yes, absolutely. If you completely control the systems of trade and distribution and you are the market through which those farmers would have to deal because you literally control the Raj, and then you are creating a famine, deliberately creating a famine, one which Churchill remarked on and dismissed, in so doing, then yeah, pretty clear. Like, obviously, yes. The exact, like, the Holodomor was in many ways similar.
They were not forcing people to sell overseas, they were paying more money for goods and essentially competing in the free market. Was that what was happening? Or was Winston Churchill literally saying, seize this food by force and take it overseas against the will of the people who farmed it?
Yes.
Because I believe it was.
Yeah, so the author of Inglorious Empire, What the British Did to India, wrote Churchill deliberately ordered the diversion of food from starving Indian civilians to well-supplied British soldiers, and even to top up European stockpiles meant for yet-to-be liberated Greeks and Yugoslavs.
So those were government supplies that the government already owned and had already purchased.
It wasn't authoritarian because they simply outbid them in the free market. No, they deliberately ordered it, actually. It was not a free decision. Well, that's fine because they actually ordered it. Well, how did they order it? Or that's fine because they owned it. Well, how'd they own it? Well, because they controlled everything because it was the Raj. Yeah. So yeah. Divine right of kings.
Yeah, so they diverted food from a colony, their colony, that they conquered.
They bought the food on the open market, then they distributed it as they saw fit. Which is to say, to their troops and to the civilians of regions they were planning to liberate.
They did not purchase.
The
they did not purchase the food.
How did they come to acquire the food then? Did they forcibly seize it from the people who farmed it? Was this appropriated without compensation? Or was it purchased on the open market by the British government?
It was a colonial government.
Because
if the British government was just buying their shit on the open market, then why were they a colonial power of India? What is that? India, jewel of the empire, the Raj government, colonial acquisition of the British people. What do they do with this immense power? Oh, they just buy their products. You can do that without colonizing them. You can do that just normally. Why do they have soldiers in India if they were just paying a higher price? What do you mean? Like, oh, dude, it was totally consensual. Then why are there soldiers there?
That's a very important distinction, because if it's the latter, the food isn't being taken. It's
Churchill's government blocked imports for food to Bengal at the same time that they were diverting food. Their main import for food was rice. They were blocking rice imports from Burma.
Quickly Googling.
Did he looking that up now?
Yes, you're asked.
The main source appears to be this anti-British screed, the Glorious Empire, which you've already cited.
Ah, yes, I've found your source. This hysterical anti-Raj tripe that I've found. Jesus. Let me try this.
Oh, again, this all seems to be one person's opinion. Let's see if I can find another one. Fall of Rangoon.
Okay. Look, I don't...
Cut off. The Fall of Rangoon. Yeah, I'm not able to find any source for him having blocked the imports. But did he actually send an order, we're not allowed to import anything? Or did he lose the city of Rangoon, which was used to import it? Because that's quite an important distinction.
Huh.
During the Japan denial policies for rice and boats. So, here we go, the denial policies. So, no, they blockaded a port that was under the control of the Japanese Empire.
Churchill also compounded it by refusing to allow shipments of grain from Australia and Canada bound for Europe to be diverted to Bengal to help aid in the famine that was going on.
So that would be food that was already part of the war supplies.
Yes, because people were starving to death.
Yes, all over the world there was a shortage of food because that's what tends to happen in
Millions of people died in Bengal as a result of the famine. I don't understand why you don't value human life.
I'm not saying I don't. I'm saying he had to choose when there was a limited number of supplies, and as commander of the Allied forces, he had to decide where those supplies were going to go. That's not an enviable position to be in, but someone wasn't going to get that rice. That rice that had already been purchased on the open market by his government. So it's not as if he started out with a policy of, how shall I, Winston Churchill, make people in India hungry today?
Yeah, well, kind of.
I mean, yeah, he said it was their own fault, in his own words. Because they breed like rabbits.
Because they overpopulated. That's standard Malthusian logic. That's also applied to...
This guy is such a meme. Malthusian logic for having a lot of children in Raj, India? Dude, people under those circumstances have 50 children no matter where you are. He's distilled Reddit. Yeah, he plays Victoria. Well, of course he does. That's where he gets his theology from.
People in Ireland.
Yeah, he's a fascist.
That was very... No, at worst, he's Thanos. He's
oh my god,
with limited resources. And
dealing with limited but dealing with limited resources, he wouldn't allow other countries to aid in the famine because India was under British colonial rule, so they couldn't make their own decisions. They couldn't help themselves get out of the famine. You idiot.
Which countries did he not allow?
Canada and Australia.
So other Commonwealth countries who he was...
They weren't his resources. He was stealing those resources.
He was stealing them. Was he not in command of the Allied war effort, at least as far as it pertained to the Commonwealth countries? It was ultimately his decision where that food was going to go. And if the people who the food ultimately did go to had been objecting to not having received it, it's him that objection would have landed to. He had to decide when there wasn't enough to go around who was going to get it. I don't think that's a position any of us would like to be in, but someone had to make that choice. And at that point, I think Canada and Australia were directly under British control. So yes, it was him.
No, they didn't. How are you arguing pro-genocide points right now? How do you think...
I'm not arguing pro-genocide. I'm saying when there was not enough supplies to go around due to disruption of supply routes caused by a war that coincided with a weather event that caused reduced crop yields, what exactly do you want him to do? There is not enough to go around.
Wait. You think that Canada, with the massive grain supply that Canada has, couldn't have helped? They offered to help. They were told no by Winston Churchill's government.
He was told that the grain supply... Who told him that the grain...
Sorry, just quickly educating myself on this. Holy shit, dude. There was so much mismanagement. Anticipating a Japanese invasion of British India via the eastern border of Bengal, the British military launched a preemptive two-pronged scorched earth initiative in eastern and coastal Bengal. Its goal was to deny the expected invaders access to food supplies, transport, and other resources. First, a denial of rice policy was carried out in 3 southern districts along the coast of the Bay of Bengal. Issued directive requiring stocks of paddy, unmilled rice, deemed surplus, and other food items to be removed or destroyed in these districts. Evidence that fraudulent, corrupt, and coercive practices by the purchasing agents removed far more rice than officially recorded, not only from designated districts, but also in unauthorized areas, suggest a greater impact. Credit freeze restricted the flow of rice into trade. Boat denial policy, deny Bengali transport to any invading Japanese army. Confiscated about 45,000 rural boats, severely disrupting riverbourne's movement of labor, supplies, and food, compromising the livelihood of boatmen and fishermen, broke the economy of the fishing class. The large-scale removal or destruction of rural boats caused a near-complete breakdown of the existing transport and administration infrastructure and market system for movement of rice paddy. No steps were taken to provide for the maintenance and repair of the confiscated boats. Many fishermen were unable to return to their trade. The army took no steps to distribute food rations to make up for the interruption of supplies. Damn, dude. Oh, my God. Wow. So, fearing an incoming Japanese invasion, they just destroyed and confiscated a ton of food and then kept people from traveling along the river, which was how they got their food and moved around. Provincial trade barriers preventing trade in domestic rice. Anxiety and soaring rice prices triggered by the fall of Burma. Trade barriers. Prevented the flow of food grains, especially rice and other goods, from moving between provinces. Punjab banned exports of wheat. The Famine Inquiry Commission of 1945 characterized this, quote, critical and potentially most dangerous stage, end quote, as a key policy failure. As one deponent to the commission put it, every province, every district, every administrative division in the east of India had become a food republic unto itself. The trade machinery for the distribution of food between provinces throughout the east of India was slowly strangled, and by spring of 1943 was dead. Bengal was unable to import domestic rice. This policy helped transform market failures and food shortage into famine and widespread death. And then there was a natural disaster. Refusal of imports. Beginning as early as December 1942, high-ranking government officials and military officers began requesting food imports for India through government military channels, but for months these requests were either rejected or reduced to a fraction of the original amount by Churchill's war cabinet. Yeah, to understand how bad this was, the Raj government wanted imports. Like, as bad as the Raj government was, as the British colonial powers were, they were thinking like, wow, holy shit, we should really, really get some food in here. And Churchill told them no. The colony was also not permitted to spend its own sterling reserves or even use its own ships to import food. Couldn't even spend its own money or use its own ships to import food. Extremely competent governance here. Very good, very smart, very necessary. Although Viceroy Linlithgow appealed for imports from mid-December 1942, he did so in the understanding that the military would be giving preference over civilians. The Secretary of State for India, Leo Emery, was on one side of a cycle of requests for food aid and subsequent refusals from the British War Cabinet that continued through 1943 and into 1944. Emery did not mention worsening conditions in the countryside, stressing Calcutta's industries must be fed or its workers will return to the countryside. Rather than meeting this request, the UK promised a relatively small amount of wheat that was specifically intended for Western India, that is, not Bengal, in exchange for an increase in rice exports from Bengal to Ceylon. So the British government was like, oh, we'll give you some food as long as you put it in the parts of the country that aren't currently experiencing a famine and take more food from the famine-stricken area. This is not a matter of calling them incompetent, right? There was a lot of incompetence, but a lot of this was also just deliberate genocide. They did the same with the Irish people. Like, it's not like the British are unfamiliar with it, you know? The tone of Linlithgow's warnings to Emery grew increasingly serious through the first half of 1943, as did Emery's requests to the War Cabinet. Yeah, this is very... Yeah, exactly, Red Cascadian. This is very, very free market that we're looking at here. Like, no, you can't sell your sterling. No, you can't use your boats. No, you can't trade your grain. We're forcing you to export more grain from the famined area. No, you can't bring more grain in from other areas. Like, yeah, it's super duper like, yeah, they just bought it in the market, man. It's just totally free market, you know? The cabinet again offered a relatively small amount, explicitly referring to it as a token shipment. His requests were again repeatedly denied, causing him to decry the current crisis as, quote, one of the greatest disasters that has befallen any people under British rule, and the damage to our reputation both among Indians and foreigners in India is incalculable. And you know what? He was right, Because after World War II, the British lost India and have never recovered. India was the jewel of the British colonial empire, and them losing it was literally the beginning of European decolonization. When they lost India, like that set off like the collapse of the British Empire, and then later, much later, the French Empire as well. France still has a shadow empire? Yes. An estimated 0.8 to 3.8 million Bengalis died out of a population of 60.3 million. The scholarly consensus is around 2.1 million, according to Irish historian. Jesus. Yeah. In case of one of the earlier famines the colonial rule caused, if I recall correctly, the Orissa famine, one administrator that actually did something to alleviate things in the area was chastised for, quote, interfering with the market. And next famine, he instead had people study, quote, how long can an Indian work during starvation? Yeah. That sounds about right.
Grain supplies were needed elsewhere.
Why would the UK want to do all this? Because they were trying to extract as much wealth as possible from India, and because the British people and Churchill thought Indians were subhuman. That's it. Ideologically, there was really not that much separating the Nazis from the British concerning their respective colonial powers, you know? The only difference, really, is that the form of colonialism the Nazis decided to engage in was a lot more local. If the Nazis had gone abroad and found uncolonized portions of Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia, and had applied essentially the exact same policies and doctrines, there would have been very little fuss about it. I mean, to give you a good idea, hold on 1 second. When was the Japanese invasion of Manchuria? It began in 1931. 8 years before World War II began, the Japanese were slaughtering Chinese people. And did we care? No, because they were doing it to an uncivilized group of peasantry. We didn't care because they weren't fudged about with the European powers. Nobody gave a shit. Nobody. The Japanese were doing this for far longer than the Nazis were. They got started earlier. And that's because, at least initially, the Japanese had the good sense to contain their brutal genocidal policies to areas that the European powers didn't really care about. We did ban oil exports to them. How long did it take for us to do that? USA ban oil to Imperial Japan date. Oh, pretty 1 decade later in 1941. That was after World War II started. And that was because they were threatening the broader Pacific. We didn't give a shit about them slaughtering millions and millions of Chinese. I'm telling you, if the Nazis had done all of their Nazi shit in countries outside of Europe, we would not have cared, and they would not have been that different to what the Dutch or the Spanish or the French or the British had done. Indochina, it was in response to attacking French colonies. Was it really directly in response to that? Yep. In retaliation for the Japanese occupation of French Indochina, the only time after a decade of slaughtering Chinese, the only time we lifted a finger to stop, we were giving them oil and scrap metal for a decade of them genociding people in Manchuria, but they touched French Indochina. And that was when we lifted a finger. So you're saying the Nazis weren't uniquely evil? No, they weren't. Even a cursory reading of history tells us this. The reason they live as the spirit of evil in the Western imagination is not because they did anything that other governments hadn't done before. It's because they did it in our adjacency. We are not only tolerant of, but active enablers of Nazi-esque policy as long as it doesn't disrupt our backyard, as long as it doesn't with our affairs. Now, admittedly, over the past 70 or 80 years, we have gotten a lot better. America today, at its worst, like the invasion of Iraq or Afghanistan, are incomparably better on an ethical level than what, like, the British were doing in India, or what the Nazis were doing, or what the Japanese were doing, or whatever. But it's still important to understand, you know? To be fair, America and Latin America got a lot better too. Yeah, no, we are far better now than we were then, and I think that's a meaningful distinction. You know, I think it's important to understand that it's a lot harder to get away with mass death these days, and that's a good thing. It should be hard to get away with mass death. Was America the least evil in World War II? World War II, tons of countries participate. And I don't know. It's like a Reddit battle, you know, like who was the most or least. I don't know. Of the powers involved, the Nazis and the Japanese were by far the worst. So I am glad that they lost.
Where? That was specifically what we're talking about. He didn't say burn the grain or toss it overboard or keep it until it rots.
I guess the millions of Bengali people who starved to death, it doesn't make a difference if the grain was burned or if the grain was just tossed into the sea. They died. They starved. They couldn't get it.
There. It was sent to other places that needed it, which was unfortunately the decision he had to make as a military commander. He had to decide which parts of the overall global war effort, because it was a world war.
He wanted them to starve to death. He said in his own words he hates Indians.
Did he say he wanted them to starve to death, or did he say that
after being informed of that they were starving to death, he just said, I hate Indians, and they are beastly people with a beastly religion? What do you think? Can't you read between the lines there that he might have just wanted this to happen? That starvation has historically been...
Oh, and if we want to draw another comparison, what the human pet guy is saying, which is, by the way, there are a lot of people in England who will defend this. What he's saying right now, Churchill to a lot of British people is like Roosevelt here, and in that, like, you can't criticize them without a lot of people stepping out with the whole he beat the Nazis thing. So there will be people who are like, oh, well, Churchill had no choice to do this. But it's worth pointing out that what he's doing is exactly the same thing that Holocaust deniers do to defend their guys. Because what they will often say is, whoa, hold on, all the wait, hold on, the Holocaust didn't happen, all the anti-Semitism shit, that's a coincidence, okay? What really happened is that they were put into work camps and they starved when Allied forces bombed the train yards, preventing food from getting to the Jewish prisoners, you know? So, but they're like, oh, well, you know, it's exactly the same thing, where they have, like, an act of deliberate genocide, and then they'll write it off as saying, like, well, okay, well, actually, this is just, like, a byproduct of a broader conflict. And in fact, if anything, it's the other guy's fault, you know? Same behavior.
Been used time and time again as a colonial tool to keep a population in check.
That cunning genius, Winston Churchill, his ability to not only start a massive global war, but also manipulate...
Well, yeah, this isn't the first time that this isn't even the first time that the Crown has used that tactic. You don't think that the famine in Ireland was used to keep people in check? It was.
That's one of the things that that I don't get. If Holocaust deniers don't believe the Holocaust happened, what do they even like about Hitler? Most Holocaust deniers know that the Holocaust happened, like that fact, and play defense with knowing disingenuousness. Most of them are fully aware of the fact that they are lying and play into it anyway, because it's a lot like denying the Holocaust is difficult, but it's a lot easier than defending the Holocaust. Like that's not a game they want to play. At least a lot of them don't. However, there are some Holocaust deniers who genuinely do deny the Holocaust, and that's usually because it's just another layer to the conspiracy for them. Like, they'll argue that the myth of the Holocaust was something that Jews came up with to, like, bait sympathy or whatever. And then they're like, well, the Holocaust didn't happen, but it should have. And then it's like another layer to add on top, basically, which is completely insane. They're basically doing the same thing.
It was the same
Ireland
shit.
Was massively overpopulated at the time.
No, it's not.
You know,
No, it
Ireland
wasn't.
isn't unpopulated. Ireland is underpopulated right now. There can be millions more people here without getting to that concern.
Because the last time there were that many people, there was a famine.
Because they were exporting food, you idiot. How are you this dumb? How? What happened to you?
Have you considered perhaps that there is a limit to how many people Ireland can sustain with its natural resources, and maybe going beyond that?
Well, yeah, maybe they shouldn't export food. Maybe they shouldn't export food.
Ireland was absolutely not overpopulated during the Irish potato famine, not even remotely. There was a blight that afflicted a large portion of their crops, and the British, who of course controlled Ireland, forced them to continue exporting their food and did not bring them in new food. It was a deliberate genocide. There was no ambiguity in historical circles. The Irish were dying en masse and begging for food, and the British did not care. They thought it was funny. Yeah. In fact, we can take a look at, hold on. Ireland population chart. Now, you have to squint a little bit, but you might notice a slight dip. Just a little change. Here, we can get it with the x-axis still present. Yep, there we go. So they were up to here, and then the population went from 6.5 million all the way here. And you know what? This right here still hasn't recovered. All the way to 2019. Ireland right now has 5.03 people. That's Ireland, the country. Northern Ireland is 1.8. They're only just now between Northern and the Isle and the country of Ireland, reaching the population the island had 190 years ago. There were also a lot of Irish immigrants to the U.S. during the famine. Yeah, a lot of the people didn't just die, they left because they were dying. Oh, that's right. Yeah. During the Great Famine in Ireland, Ottoman Sultan Majid, donated some amount of money to famine relief. A letter written by Irish notables in the Ottoman archives explicitly thanks the Sultan for his help. According to legend, that's always a reliable way to start a sentence, the Sultan had originally intended to send £10,000, which would have been 10 times the amount he was able to send, but either British diplomats or his own ministers requested the Sultan only send £1,000 so as not to violate protocol by donating more than Queen Victoria, who had sent £2,000. He is also said to have sent 3 or 5 ships full of food. Shipping records relating to the port appear to have not survived. Yeah, it's far enough back, it's kind of... Yeah, even the American Cherokee sent food, yeah. Is there any genocide that has been made up or embellished? What a weird question to ask. There have been so many genocides throughout history. Historical records are going to vary off of the mark all the time because we can't know exactly what's happening. Generally speaking, the historical community tends to be pretty responsible when it comes to estimating stuff like this because the historical community is, generally speaking, full of dullards with big, thick-framed glasses who are really interested in stuff like historical records and cross-referencing. Obviously, shit gets exaggerated by, like, random people all the time, you know? Like, I'm sure that right now there's some kid in Serbia who's screaming that, like, Armenians killed 100 billion Serbs back when they were the ruling ethnicity of the world or something, like, you know, and vice versa. So, like, yeah, sure. But in terms of, like, institutionally, are there any, like, genocides that are completely overstated? Not one that I can really think of. Albanians, whatever.
Food from the colony, huh? During a famine.
Maybe Malthus had a point.
Maybe Malthus.
You're
just a Nazi.
No, I'm not.
You're right, you're worse.
He kind of is.
I'm saying that you can't increase the population indefinitely and then never have a resource problem.
So again, we can use this for some rhetorical stuff. Notice how he never discusses the specifics of any incident and refers back to generalized arguments. So the idea that Ireland was overpopulated is ridiculous. And no, like at the time, nobody argues that, because what caused the famine wasn't overpopulation, it was a plague through the crops. Like, what does that have to do with overpopulation? You can be sensibly populated, and if all of your crop rots and dies, then that will still cause a famine. Like there's no relationship between these factors. You can have a sensibly populated nation and still have a famine if all your food dries up. So like he's just deferring back to this because he doesn't really care, you know? Have you noticed these guys just flat out ignore the concept of artificial/imposed scarcity? Well, it's not really about like the broader concepts. He's just like a simp for power, right? It's the peasant brain mentality. You know, would the world only be so much better if it was ruled by enlightened geniuses like myself? And wouldn't I have the ability to do so were I only a monarch? So that is the system I will defend. And yes, even if a country was overpopulated, that wouldn't justify any of the genocidal policies the British took with the Irish people or the Indian people. Can you believe this has been like the entire stream? How many people are here? It's been so long since we've done this. 7K people? God damn.
Unless the population...
They didn't have a resource problem. The resource problem was maybe the parasite of the crown stealing from them.
Again, when we say stealing, do we mean buying the grain on the free market by outbidding the other purchasers and then sending it overseas?
No.
Or was this for...
Also, by the way, even if okay, so I'm going to entertain this hypothetical really quickly, all right? As was the case for both India and Ireland, if there is a colonial power that controls your country, that means you do not have democratic representation, and the colonial power controls and it communes with your wealthy. So even if everything is done on the free market, here's the thing, guys. If that country was controlled democratically and their bourgeoisie were trying to sell off grain during a time of famine, do you know what a democratically controlled country could do? Hang them in the courtyard in front of the Parliament building and have new people manage the shipment of grain. And in fact, in a democratic country, if millions of people are starving and a very small economically privileged subsection of your population is contributing to that starvation, there are a wide range of violent and non-violent reprimands a democratic government could arrive at the very least of which being the seizure of their goods. But if you're controlled by a colonial power who doesn't give a shit whether you live or die, that's no longer possible. So it doesn't actually matter, even if you argued it was all being done in the free market, which it wasn't. He's lying. That's not what happened, as we saw with the Indian situation. That is not even remotely the case. But even if it was the case, it would not matter. You guys see what I'm doing here with, like, the water tunnel we're covering up, right? Right.
Forcible seizure. Did Irish farmers have the freedom to sell things where they wanted to?
I think
and
even...
they were simply being outbid by the crown?
I think no matter what the answer is, you'll defend it. Because at the end of the day, you just think might makes right, and genocide is fine as long as it's being done in the name of the crown. Like, do you disagree with that point?
Fair.
Notice he knows she's right. Because he's asking, like, was it all done under the purview of the free market? But he's getting ready to defend it whether or not she says yes. He even pauses when she says that. He said, oh, I don't think that's entirely fair. Because he knows fully well that he's going to go down that road no matter what she answers with. She's completely right. Like I said, he doesn't actually have... Authoritarians are often like this. They don't actually have any beliefs outside of their defense of power. So, you know, it may feel like you could get them on one point or another, but in reality, that's just so often not the case.
I don't think that's entirely fair, and I think that I've addressed your points about things you think the crown has done that are negative. Would you agree? Would you address my points about things the crown has done which are positive?
I think the millions of people who lost their lives as a result of colonial conquest and genocide can never benefit from any of the good things the crown could have ever possibly done. No.
Also, what have they done that's
good? I would
good?
think the millions of slaves liberated by the crown
When did
benefited.
the crown liberate slaves? What are you talking about here?
Are you being serious, or
Am I being serious?
have you not looked up why there's this thing called the Triangle Trade, where slaves were shipped over the Atlantic? Did you look up why that ended?
I love how you just divert because you know you can't defend this. It's horrendous.
I'm saying if you are only going to bring up the people who were negatively impacted.
Negatively impacted, they died. Millions.
Also, thanking the crown for ending slavery would be like thanking slave owners for ending. They did the slavery. They were the trade. Like what? Like, oh, thank you for not doing the triangle trade anymore. That's very nice of you. Also, was it a royal decree or was it parliament? Hold on. Slavery ban UK. The 1807 abolition of the slave trade from the UK Parliament. Then what does this have to do? King George III signed it into law because that's what the king did with stuff passed by Parliament. They even paid the slave owners after too. Jesus. It's also keep in mind the human pet guy would like be defending slavery in the context of like because like why is he taking credit for slavery being ended when he doesn't think slavery is a bad thing? Like he's done this same shit with the Bengal famine. He would just say like, "Oh, well, slavery is how you move society forward. It's brutal, but that was the process for..." Like he would do the exact same thing to defend slavery as he did for defending genocide. So there's no... How tall can kelp blocks grow? 25 tall, right? I don't know if I want this to go 25 tall. That's quite deep.
Yes, that was a negative impact for them. But I'm saying you also have to take into account the positive impacts.
1 million people in Ireland, 3 million people in Bengal, as a result of the crown.
11, 12, 13, 14.
As a result of resources being limited
Nice,
and the
Irish.
crown being the highest bidder.
Resources weren't limited.
Resources are always limited.
There weren't too many people. Like, I know the population of Ireland at that time, and no, this island could sustain it.
It was way higher than its current...
I know,
Clearly
it was...
couldn't.
Yes, I know.
Clearly it couldn't. Clearly
It could if you weren't exporting food during a famine. How do you keep forgetting this point that they were taking resources? The island could sustain itself.
Were they taking resources?
Okay, the
the
crown made them starve. They saw they were starving and they said they didn't care because starvation is used as a tool of colonial conquest, which you are okay with. You're fine with genocide. You're fine with people starving to death as long as it's in the name of crown country and the nation's glory. I know what you believe in.
I mean, I would be opposed to things like the Holodomor because I.
Well, the Holodomor is basically what happened in Ireland.
Well, no, because that.
Yeah, so the only reason he doesn't like the Holodomor is because it's Soviet. That's it. Because he's defended every single, like he has already issued every single defense that Holodomor defenders issue. Literally every single one. Oh, it was a necessity in order to transport like resources and there was no other way. Oh, like how can you actually say that like this was being done unfairly when it was just like grain being taken from this area? Oh, how can you have an issue with like the distribution of this? Like every single defense that I've heard people use for the Holodomor, he's already done. It's just because they're red-coded. That's it. He doesn't like North Korea or the Soviet Union or China or whatever, not because there's anything meaningfully evil he sees in their governance, but because it's coded red, it's coded egalitarian, which he doesn't care for. Thanks, okay.
That was forcibly taken. It wasn't purchased.
Are you a retard? Jesus Christ.
Well, that's rather ableist, Keffals.
I am ableist. I am
Based.
ableist against people like you. I don't even think that you're human.
True.
Rude. Okay, so Mr. Flexington's saying the result was the same. The result is going to be the same for someone. What do you do when there aren't enough resources to go around? When you have more hungry people than you have food to feed them with?
Okay, this is Rhetoric 101 that I'm teaching you guys right now, okay? This is like a very important lesson. If you're talking to somebody who's defending monstrous bullshit, but every time you try to call them on it, they go back to this like haughty, all right, time to enter like the classroom, time for a lesson on civics 101. Oh, you don't like me defending millions of people being killed due to the callousness and genocidal intent of the British Crown? Well, all right, class, listen up. How exactly do you manage distribution of resources in times of scarcity? Like, if ever you have to deal with a person like that, they are filibustering. They're doing it on purpose because they don't want to answer to what they've actually said. Ask them for specifics, always. Always, always, always. You have to hold them down to it. You have to say, no, 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 no. I want to know exactly why this, that, the other. And you have to get them to answer to that. Of course, you know, very often they won't, or they'll get offended, or they'll accuse you of sort of like bowling over them in the argument or whatever. But it's just whining. You have to keep it up. You also have to call them a retard. Well, of course, but that goes without saying, doesn't it? Heal the Iron Golem. Can you heal it by putting iron on the Iron Golem? I haven't done that before. Is that possible? Yes? Oh, okay. Well, I have iron. Come here, my dude. I will heal you. Nice. Strong. Strong. Very good.
Someone is going to go hungry.
There was enough food in Ireland to sustain the population.
Oh, this is another good rhetorical question to ask. If the food just has to go somewhere and there aren't enough resources, why is it that it's always the colonized country who gets the shit end of the stick? Like, if you're arguing this is all fair and above board and such, why is it that, you know, India or Ireland is the one where they have these big genocides and not England? Why is it that, for some reason, you know, if all this is being done freely and fairly, why is it that they're the ones who get to come away from it being able to eat? Slavery persisted for decades longer than the Brits ended slavery on purpose. Oh, yeah, on paper. Yeah, of course. Guys, over a century after the Brits ended slavery, they were killing millions in the Bengal famine. You know, that certainly didn't end things there. I'm just saying that this human pet guy would, like, explicitly defend slavery if he had to. Which, like, I'm pretty sure, like, you know, if Keffals just asked, if Keffals just straight up said, like, oh, well, you know, why would I thank the British Crown for ending slavery if they were the ones doing the slavery? He would, without missing a beat, start talking about how they had no choice but to do the slavery at the time, and that's just the way nations work, and you need to grow up. How explain to me, how exactly can the light of civilization spread if you're so... Yeah, they basically exempted slavery in India, you know. If you're willing to condemn... Remember earlier when he, like, scoffed at the idea that most governments throughout history have been authoritarian? Like, that's the kind of person we're dealing with here.
Ireland's economy was designed as a food exporter. That's the thing. There are food exporters and there are food importers in the world. Unless every place in the world is going to devote itself entirely to producing food, in which case we go back to having a medieval economy, there would have to be food importers.
This isn't a good faith debate. You're either a troll or you are literally the dumbest person I've ever talked to.
You seem to think that there is no such thing as a resource shortage, and I genuinely don't know how to explain to you that there
was a resource. Okay, let me sum it up. There was a resource shortage because people were starving, and during the time people were starving, farms were still exporting food out of the country. You idiot! They were exporting it to England because that was what the Crown wanted.
The famine wasn't just in Ireland, was it?
It was the Irish potato famine. And it was from a disease that infected the Irish crop. So...
The famine was not just in Ireland. The starvation was just in Ireland, but the famine wasn't.
It was over... Ireland was more dependent on potato crops than other areas that were affected. This is why we call it the Irish potato famine, not like the greater European potato famine. And also, interestingly enough, you know, in spite there being food shortages broadly caused by it, it was the people actually growing the food who starved to death. Isn't that interesting? Isn't it Isn't it just so crazy how so often, you know, when it comes to colonial powers, whenever there's a general shortage or a general problem, it's always the colonized people who die by the millions. Absolutely wacky.
Why? I wonder
Ireland
why.
was a net exporter of food well before this. There were other economies around the place that had grown to dependent on food imports. I mean, technically, Keffals, if we took any food import area, like cities are net food importers. If we just built a wall around cities and didn't let food in, the cities would starve. They aren't producing food of their own.
The famine was just the famine. The famine was just in Ireland.
They also stole livestock. Yeah, there's so much to this. The evil is real. You remember what I've said before about the concept of informed simplicity? Like, everything in this debate has been an example of this, where he has tried to invoke the specter of nuance and complexity. Oh, the world just works this way. Oh, it's complicated, this, that, the other. But then if you look into it or know anything at all about it, it's like actually incredibly simple. That's been like the nature of this this debate the whole time. No.
The famine was just in Ireland. The blight wasn't. The blight had affected a lot of other countries.
The famine was just in... Okay, so you just admit it. What is wrong with you?
What is wrong with...
What is wrong with
What do you
you?
think happens if Ireland stops exporting food? What do you think
They
happens
have enough...
to-
Then they... Oh, what happens if they stop exporting food during a famine? Then they
What
can
do you
feed...
think happened to the
Then they
food
can think...
exports?
Then they
Did the
can feed
food
their
just
own
get
people.
shipped out into the sea and then thrown overboard? Or did the food go somewhere and be eaten by people?
If they didn't export it, it could have been used to feed people during a famine.
It could have been used to feed the people in Ireland. Where do you think that food ended up?
It ended up getting exported to England.
And certain other countries as well, and then eaten. Someone was going to... So when the food production goes down, someone ends up not eating it. Your argument seems to be that the food producers should be the ones...
Isn't there an Umberto Eco quote about this, about how fascists know they're lying but they don't care? Yeah, no, well, yeah, of course. The belief that it is wrong to lie is, like, not a universal one. Fascists lie gleefully all the time because all they care about is power. I don't know if that's necessarily... I still don't think fascism is the descriptor here, I think this is like paradox brain. Like, anything that is like the Civ tech tree, that in his mind, like, it's morally justifiable and he'll say anything. But I don't know if he thinks he's lying. It's really tough. He could just genuinely be, like, very unintelligent. It's kind of hard to say. I don't know.
Are you into having human pets so you can have someone who doesn't question you? Because I feel like there's no way another person would want to talk to you.
My point, Keffals, is that if you had shut down the imports, someone else would have gone hungry. If you'd shut down the exports, someone else would have gone hungry.
This is not true. If there is a general lack of food available, there are tons of things a responsible government can do in order to keep everyone alive. Usually by making sure there's a fair distribution of grain and resources, by implementing rations, by trying to, like, control what types of foods and crop are produced so that it leans more towards, like, less like meat production and more towards grain production, stockpiling, not selling to other countries, like all that crap, right? And the British government did none of these things because they didn't care, because they thought that the Irish were subhuman, and it was funny to them that they were dying. That's it, you know? Like, the idea that it's just like, oh, well, what were you going to do? Like, there was stuff to do. Nobody in England was under threat of starvation.
Less food being produced than there was previously. Suddenly, population exceeded units of food produced.
England wasn't facing a food shortage.
No, because it was importing food from Ireland because it could outbid Ireland. Your argument seems to be
Ireland was producing the food, you fucking idiot.
Yes! If that food hadn't been exported, it would have been the English famine.
That is a lie. That's just not true. Yeah.
Why?
They stole the food.
Hypothetical scenario. You have 50 people. They order 50 pizzas. Only one of the pizza delivery vehicles gets waylaid.
Why
and
do
so
I
only
care?
49 pizzas arrive. Someone isn't getting the pizza. How do you decide who that person
What
is
do you like
going
to do
be?
to your human pets?
I don't think these are real
Allow me
source
changing
blocks,
the
guys.
What do you like to do to your human pets?
Now, okay, you've accused me
What
of
do you
diverting.
like to
Now
do
you've
to your
diverted.
human pets?
I would like you to acknowledge
What do
the
you like to
scenario.
do to your human pets?
We've discussed that.
What do you like to do to your human pets?
A temporary sheet of source blocks underneath. Okay.
Why is this?
What do you like to do to
Is-
your human pets?
Is she still there? or
What do
has she
you like
left
to
tape
do
recorder
to your
with her
human
voice?
pets?
Oops.
I like to encourage them to consider the nature of limited resources.
What do you like to
in a
do to your
global
human
economy.
pets?
I think I
What
may
do you
have
like to
broken
do
her
to them?
brain.
I'm asking a question you can't answer.
I'm saying it's damned irrelevant.
It's not irrelevant. What do you like to do to your human pets?
I want to point out that I
Okay,
don't
you know
think
what?
it's
Stay
irrelevant
on the
either.
left. I don't think the right has much use for you.
Thank you.
Is he a breeder? I don't think this guy's getting laid, so probably not, no.
I couldn't even focus on satisfactory. I just ended up driving my car around in circles trying to figure out what was going on.
Wait, she's been playing Satisfactory? I don't know what that game looks like. You need to go back to water physics school? What do you want from me? I don't know. I'm just gonna build it all on the top. And then... Oh, the video ended. Oh my god. Well, that was interesting. Well, I'd say we learned a lot of valuable stuff. Keffals could have done better with the argument. No. Like, Keffals is talking to a clown. You know, he's not going to be convincing to, like, anyone. I don't expect Keffals or anyone to be like, oh, let's do this, like, giant thing and, like, the logistics of the Bengal famine while talking to, like, such a cartoonishly, you know, what a disgusting person. Yeah. He's basically a lolcow. Like, people mostly make fun of him. He's got a know your meme page. Okay, let's just... Okay. Now, if I get rid of these blocks underneath, it should all be fine down there, right? So, will it flow down like, are all the blocks underneath now also source blocks, or are they downward current blocks? Because I think You need kelp? Okay, gotcha. So it's basically a death trap if I swim down there right now, is what you're saying. No, you can still swim up? Okay. Well, let's just finish this up. You know, it would be very unsatisfying for me personally to drop this right now. How are you going to make it to the collection part? I have no idea what you're talking about. I talked about Naomi Wu last stream. Fruit Fourths. Did that count as a politics segment? Kind of. I mean, it was mostly like a lolcow segment, I feel. Okay, I can still swim. Alright, nice. It's so spooky and dark down here, man. What the... Oh my god. Why is it so spooky here? Needs to reach the surface. Okay, we're working on it. We're working on it. Yeah, we'll build an access point. We'll do the stuff. We'll do the stuff. We'll do it. Don't worry. Okay, we're just testing. We're getting started. It's fine. It's fine. That's enough of that shit. I did not think that would go on for that long. Those debate go-overs. I regret my bad advice. Yeah. You need sea lanterns or maybe frog lights. No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.